Chapter 1066. The Absolute Way was regarded as the strongest way. When Lin Sun first came into contact with the Absolute Way, this way was described as unreachable and enviable. It was rare in ancient times. In ancient times, this way was almost as ethereal as a legend, and many geniuses sighed at it. Some people even doubted whether this way really existed. But as Lin Sun's cultivation deepened and he experienced many things, he gradually found that the definition of the Absolute Way by the practitioners in the world had changed along with the passage of time. In his understanding, the Absolute Way was the strongest way since ancient times. When one reached this level, he was like the king of a realm and could defeat all opponents. But in the eyes of other practitioners, the core successors of ancient orthodoxies like Kong Ling, Su Xingfeng, and Xue Qianhen were already the Absolute Way. There were bound to be mistakes in this. In the previous battles, Lin Sun had killed more than 10 so-called peerless figures. But according to Lin Sun's judgment, the strength of these peerless figures could only be regarded as touching the threshold of the road to the top, but had not yet entered it. Even some people who hadn't touched the threshold boasted that they were the Absolute Way, which made Lin Sun feel absurd and ridiculous. Was his cognition too harsh, or the world's definition of the Absolute Way had become extremely tolerant? Lin Sun didn't know, but he knew that compared with these Absolute Way, people like Sword Devil, Ye Chun, and Laughing at the Heavens were undoubtedly more in line with the definition of the Absolute Way. Even if I take a step back and divide the Absolute Way into 3 levels, those guys who were killed by me just now are at the bottom at best, just at the beginning of the Absolute Way. As for people like Ye Chun and Laughing at the Heavens, they are just at the beginning of the Absolute Way. As for how strong they are, it's hard to estimate. And the top figures of the previous generation, such as Yun Qingbai, Yin Zhanxiu, Wang Xuanyu, Mi Hengzhen, and Yi Mo, should have extremely amazing achievements on the Absolute Way. Even if they can't be called the strongest, they should not be far from it, Lin Sun pondered. The Great Era was coming, which meant that there would be countless peerless geniuses in the world, rising like stars and competing in the Great Era. Before that, if he could have a deep and accurate understanding of the Absolute Way among his peers, it would be beneficial and harmless. No matter what, I will walk my Tao. The path of the Tao will be the most unprecedented. After a long time, all the doubts in Lin Sun's mind disappeared. His Taoist heart was clear and firm. He sat cross-legged on the Taoist altar and pondered the mysteries of the summit. On the other mountain peaks, the great battles were still unfolding. At the same time, the spectators from different orthodoxies at the foot of the mountain were also paying close attention to the situation. Lin Sun was destined to get one of the 36 places on the list of junior giants. Now, it was time to see who would get the places on the other peaks. The battles on every single mountain peak could be said to be horrifying. It was a battle between those of the same generation and a battle between experts. Any single battle was sufficient to cause a great uproar in the outside world. But on the Immortal God Mountain, it was a common sight. The powerhouses of the Wind Whisperer clan were almost too busy. There were too many remarkable battles, and there were countless peerless characters who shone brilliantly on the battlefield. Moreover, each of them had their own distinct characteristics. It was really dazzling, and it was difficult to choose between them. At the same time, Lin Sun also looked at the peaks of other mountains and spread out his huge spiritual power to watch the battles. The wild blade laughs at the heavens. His saber was as fast as lightning with earth-shattering power. Since he ascended to the Taoist altar, almost no one could stand more than 10 moves from him. The sword devil Yi Chun was similarly outstanding. The ancient crepe myrtle sword emitted a vast sword intent, and it possessed a dignified aura and an extremely destructive devilish might. It swept through everything before it, and no one was able to resist its edge. On the contrary, Ji Miyun was also a peerless swordsman, but his sword intent was as violent as thunder. It was overwhelming and strong, and its killing intent soared into the sky. Li Qingping's fighting means were strange, cruel, and unpredictable. He fought with a green jade flute. The sound of the flute was like the sound of ghosts and gods, which had the power to take away people's souls. Yu Linkong, Ji Xingyao, Go Yinjin. These peerless characters who have been famous for a long time are destined to be on the list of junior giants. Lin Sun paid special attention to Go Yinjin. His fighting style could be described as cruel and abnormal. Any opponent that challenged him would definitely have their bodies forcefully torn apart by his hands, causing severed limbs to shatter and a rain of blood to spray down like a waterfall. His opponents would suffer unimaginable torture and devastation before they were eliminated. Such cruel means also aroused the anger and roar of the elders of many ancient orthodoxies. They couldn't wait to kill this black dog with their own hands. But although Go Yinjin's means were cruel, it was extremely shocking. Most of the strong people who witnessed such a bloody scene were so shocked that they didn't dare to challenge him, for fear that they would be torn apart by Go Yinjin. When Lin Sun looked over, he saw Go Yinjin holding a beautiful woman in his hands. His hands separated, and the woman's arms and body were torn apart like a piece of cloth. The bright red blood rained down on the Taoist altar like a waterfall. Go Yinjin revealed an excited and bloodthirsty smile, and then he stretched out his scarlet red tongue to lick the blood that was sprinkling in the air. After that, he suddenly took a deep breath and let out a moan of comfort while his expression became extremely intoxicated. Whoosh! Almost at the same time, he also noticed Lin Sun's gaze. He grinned, revealing his snow-white teeth, and said something silently. "You're right, Lin Sun. Demon God Lin, I'll tear your hands apart like this and taste whether your blood has the wonderful breath of a demon god." His Adam's apple moved, and he laughed unscrupulously as if he was staring at a tempting prey. Lin Sun glanced at him quietly and withdrew his gaze with a straight face. If he met Go Yinjin in the battle for luck, he didn't mind torturing this black dog to death little by little. Then, Lin Sun saw Xiao Qinghe. Lin Sun was surprised that Xiao Qinghe could continue fighting on the Taoist altar until now. As far as he knew, although Xiao Qinghe was powerful, there was still a long way to go from the real top. But Xiao Qinghe could guard the mountain until now, which could only prove that this guy's potential was extremely deep, far beyond the real strength he showed. But immediately, Lin Sun frowned. Xiao Qinghe was in a bad situation. His opponent was a young man in a feather robe with a feminine aura. His skin was fair, his face was handsome like a woman, and he carried a unique charm. If Lin Sun remembered correctly, this young man in a feather robe was called Qing Wenwan, and he was regarded as the holy son of Qing Wan. Qing Lianer, who died in Lin Sun's hands, was the cousin of Qing Wenwan. At this moment, Qing Wenwan's figure was unfathomable like an ethereal figure. He was not only fast, but also extremely mysterious. No matter how Xiao Qinghe attacked, he couldn't even touch Qing Wenwan's clothes. There was no doubt that Qing Wenwan had an absolute advantage in body movement. Originally, Xiao Qinghe had no hope of winning under normal circumstances, but Qing Wenwan wasn't in a hurry to defeat his opponent. Instead, he played with Xiao Qinghe like a cat playing with a mouse. Qing Wenwan's temperament was feminine like a woman, and he was extremely enchanting. His slender and fair hand held a thin and sharp golden needle. He seemed to be embroidering and regarded Xiao Qinghe as a piece of cloth. Every time he attacked, he would pierce a fine needle-like hole on Xiao Qinghe's body. Xiao Qinghe was obviously suffering great pain. His face was livid, and he was extremely angry. But he couldn't catch Qing Wenwan's steps at all, so he suffered more and more injuries. It could be clearly seen that the skin all over his body was pierced with fine bloody holes and strands of blood soaked out, outlining the embryonic form of a rose. Qing Wenwan was indeed embroidering. His movements even carried a kind of unconstrained and effortless beauty, like a great painter who had reached the extreme realm waving his brush and splashing ink. However, this method of treating his opponent as a canvas, using blood as ink and golden needles as the tip of his brush, didn't make people feel a trace of beauty. Instead, it seemed extremely horrifying. Anyone who saw this scene would probably feel their scalp numb and feel terrified. Xiao Qinghe was in great pain. His skin was trembling all over, and his eyes were about to crack. He seemed to be desperately trying to kill Qing Wenwan with all his strength. But everything seemed to be in vain. Qing Wenwan looked leisurely and calm. The golden needles in his hand flew, and he turned a blind eye to Xiao Qinghe's anger. This was a humiliation. After all, Xiao Qinghe was also one of the 16 blazing sons of Sun Moon Palace. His identity, status, and combat strength could be regarded as the top of the younger generation in the world. But at this time, he was manipulated as a canvas, which was undoubtedly a serious trampling and insult to his dignity and Taoist heart. Even Lin Sun couldn't help but reveal a touch of coldness in his black eyes, and there was an irrepressible killing intent in his heart. Although Qing Wenjuan's means were not as brutal as Go Yinjin's, he was even more abnormal. At this moment, Lin Sun's face changed. He clenched his fists quietly, and the killing intent in his eyes seemed to be real, bursting out with a frightening divine light. On the top of the mountain in the distance, Xiao Qinghe's figure suddenly stiffened and stopped in the air as if he was cast with a fixed body technique. At this moment, Qing Wenwan stepped forward, pinched the slender golden needles, and pierced them into Xiao Qinghe's heart. Then his figure flashed, and he returned to his original place. But Xiao Qinghe's body seemed to have been sliced by countless crisscrossing threads, and it suddenly exploded. The blood mist evaporated, reflected in the void, and turned into a rich and enchanting bloody rose pattern, bright red and dazzling. All the strongmen who noticed this scene felt cold all over, and fear arose in their hearts. This means was simply abnormal to the extreme. However, Qing Wenwan seemed to be completely unaware of this. She rubbed her chin as she stared at the blood-red rose that was blooming furiously in the sky, and her feminine and fair face was filled with admiration. Although Lin Sun knew that it was impossible for Xiao Qinghe to die on the immortal mountain, he still felt endless anger in his heart, and his black eyes were terrifyingly cold. Killing was just a matter of nodding one's head to the ground, but Qing Wenwan used such abnormal and bloody means to humiliate and torture Xiao Qinghe. This was absolutely unforgivable. Chapter 1067. Xiao Qinghe was eliminated in an extremely humiliating and cruel way. This made Lin Sun unable to restrain his anger. It was not a big deal to be defeated, but it was unacceptable for Lin Sun to be humiliated in such a way. Lin Sun, are you very angry? That's right. When you killed my cousin Leander, I was also very angry. A feminine and hoarse voice came to his ears, like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue. Lin Sun saw that Qing Wenwan had looked at the mountain where Lin Sun was from a distance. He was dressed in a feather robe. His skin was white, his face was handsome and enchanting, and his thin lips were scarlet like a red blade. You could take revenge on me. Why did you kill Xiao Qinghe? Lin Sun looked cold. Because I also want you to experience the feeling of being angry. Qing Wenwan laughed wantonly and arrogantly. Speaking of which, you have no one to rely on. You don't even have a relative in the ancient desolation realm. It's a headache for me to take revenge on you. Fortunately, I finally found Xiao Qinghe. Obviously, before this, Qing Wenwan had secretly inquired about Lin Sun and intended to kill Lin Sun's close people. Don't you worry about being attacked by the Sun Moon Palace? Lin Sun frowned. He felt that this guy looked feminine and calm, but in fact, he was as crazy as a pervert. If I was afraid, would I dare to do this? Qing Wenwan said unhurriedly. You've seen what happened to Xiao Qinghe. I'm not afraid to tell you that unless you obediently kneel down and beg me right now, I'll make every single person related to you into a painting of blood. In the end, he couldn't help but smile. His feminine and enchanting face was full of a crazy aura. Lin Sun was silent for a moment, and then he also smiled and said, Then I'd like to see whether your Cyan Phoenix tribe can bear my anger. If you dare to do this, I dare to destroy your whole tribe. If you don't believe me, you could try to see who will laugh in the end. By the way, you'd better pray that I don't meet you later. His voice was calm, but it was filled with determination. After that, he withdrew his eyes and no longer looked at Qing Wenwan. Qing Wenjuan's actions had already touched his reverse scale, causing him to be unable to endure it any longer, and he aroused the resolution to kill Qing Wenjuan. At the same time, Qing Wenjuan was startled. Suddenly, she giggled hysterically. Her feminine eyes were filled with madness. Then let's give it a try. Clang! On another mountain peak, Alu was like a ferocious fighting beast that didn't know fatigue. With just his bare fists, he blasted away his opponent's treasure and kicked him out of the Dao platform. His battle intent surged into the sky as he looked arrogantly at the surroundings, and then he pointed at the group of geniuses nearby that were terrified to the point of not daring to move forward. He said with displeasure, "Why are all of you terrified? Aren't you guys unconvinced? Why are you cowering there like a girl? You guys are *T prodigies." It was extremely provocative, and it caused the geniuses of the various sects to be infuriated to the point their lungs almost exploded. They wished for nothing more than to tear apart this barbarian's stinky mouth. But in the end, no one dared to step forward. It couldn't be helped. This barbarian's combat strength was just like his foul mouth. They were ridiculously powerful. Up until this point in the battle, even peerless figures had been forcefully suppressed by him. So who would dare to step forward? Seeing this, Lin Sun withdrew his gaze and looked at Zhao Jingxian on another mountain peak. After several years, Zhao Jingxuan's strength had also advanced by leaps and bounds, even to the extent that even Lin Sun was amazed by her strength. Dressed in a purple dress, her slender and graceful figure was as graceful as a swimming dragon, fighting on the Dao platform like a fairy strolling leisurely in the courtyard. A treasure cauldron of 9 dragons was controlled by her, which deduced 9 phantoms of real dragons. They held their heads high in the void, flying and roaring, and their divine power was monstrous, as if the power of heaven was descending. Her opponent was a peerless figure, but in just dozens of rounds, he was firmly suppressed by Zhao Jingxian in a head-on confrontation. She has Imperial Dragon Qi and has mastered the unique skills of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. It's reasonable for her to have such achievements. Lin Sun was relieved. According to his judgment, if nothing unexpected happened, Zhao Jingxian could easily be promoted to the Junior Tycoon list. Yes, Junior Sister Jingxian has reached the level of reaching the next level on the way of peerless cultivation and is not far from reaching the peak. At the same time, Yin Zhanxiu, who had been paying attention to Zhao Jingxian, also nodded secretly, with a touch of heartfelt admiration in his eyes. Buzz! Suddenly, the whole immortal mountain was buzzing incessantly, producing the immortal and supreme rule of the Great Way, which made the top of the 36 peaks shine brilliantly. It could be clearly seen that the battles on every Taoist altar were stopped at this moment. At the same time, the powerhouses who failed the challenge were expelled from the Taoist altar by an invisible force, leaving only 36 figures standing on the Taoist altar. After 30 minutes, the guarding of the mountain was over. In an instant, the people waiting at the foot of the mountain all looked at the figures standing on the top of the mountain. Laughing at the heavens, Yi Chun, Jin Muyun, Chu Beihai, Li Qingping, Yu Linkong, Ji Xingyao, Go Yinjin, Zhao Jingxian, of course, there was also Lin Sun. A total of 36 talents had successfully guarded the mountain. Those who climbed the mountain but didn't rush to the Taoist altar all showed a look of frustration and disappointment when they saw this scene. Climbing the mountain and guarding the mountain seemed to be a step apart, but there was a world of difference between them. Those who succeeded in guarding the mountain would be ranked on the Junior Tycoon list and become a Junior Tycoon among the younger generation. This was a form of extraordinary glory, and it was the most powerful display of one's strength. As for the geniuses of the other sects, they could only be reduced to supporting roles and be eliminated. So, they were bound to be unable to draw too much attention in the future. This was the competition for the Grand Tao, and a single step was very likely to be the difference between the heavens and the earth. Next, it's time to carry out the final ranking battle for karmic luck. I wonder who amongst the 36 Junior Tycoons will be able to take the first place in the end. The cultivators at the foot of the mountain discussed animatedly and the cultivators of the various ancient sects were watching from the sidelines. Compared to the past, the competition this time can absolutely be said to be unprecedented. Some of the geniuses of the sects would absolutely possess the strength to be ranked on the junior tycoon list if it was in the past. Yet now, they've become losers, and it's a pity. Exactly. It isn't that they aren't strong, but the most dazzling and peerless figures from the four great worlds of the region of ancient desolation have converged amongst the geniuses participating in the competition this time. So, the losses aren't because of the battle. Every time a great era comes, there will be countless monstrous and geniuses rising to compete for supremacy in the world and the Grand Tao. Although the great era hasn't come this time, we can already feel from these young people that this great era is destined to be unprecedented and unprecedented. Those seniors were all sighing with emotion. The only exception is perhaps Demon God Lin, being targeted and attacked by so many geniuses of the ancient orthodoxies. If it were someone else, I'm afraid he would have been killed long ago. But this guy held on until the end, which is really amazing. Just wait and see. The more eye-catching he is, the more miserable he will be when he leaves the immortal Forbidden Land. Many people were also paying attention to Lin Sun. Before, no one had expected that he could be ranked on the junior tycoon list. They all thought that he was destined to be eliminated under the attack of the geniuses of the ancient orthodoxies. But the result was unexpected. Lin Sun won. He alone defeated all the geniuses on the 9th mountain peak. This also attracted the attention of the experts on the junior tycoon list on the other mountain peaks. This is interesting. Laughing at the heavens, sharp eyes burst out a touch of brilliance. Demon God Lin, I'm looking forward to having a drink with you. Sword Demon Yi Chen's sleeves fluttered in the wind as he smiled happily. That's more like a demon god. Alu grinned. Jin Miyun, Chu Beihai, Yu Lingkong, Li Qingping, Go Yinjin, and the others all looked gloomy and unsightly. Previously, they had all sent their forces to suppress Lin Sun, but they never thought that Lin Sun would be able to win under such circumstances. This made them feel disgusted as if they had eaten a fly. Impressive, demon god little brother. Zhao Jingxian blinked and teased mischievously. So what if he won? Let's see how long a shameless guy like you can be arrogant in the upcoming fight for Providence. Ji Xingyao was very displeased. As for the other geniuses who had no enmity with Lin Sun and did not know him, but were also ranked on the junior tycoon list, they could not help but pay more attention to Lin Sun. Some were surprised, some were impressed, and some were wary and vigilant. Next would be the ranking battle. Lin Sun's existence was undoubtedly an anomaly, so they had to pay attention to him. Lin Sun did not care about these people's attention at all. At his level, although he did not dare to boast that he was absolutely sure to win among his peers, he was absolutely not afraid of any opponent. How will the fight for Providence proceed? Lin Sun looked at the Taoist altars on different peaks. There were no judges on the immortal God Mountain. Lin Sun only knew that it was enough to follow the rules. Boom! Just as Lin Sun was pondering, every Taoist altar on the 36 peaks rumbled, and rays of golden light rushed out. They intersected in the void at the center of the peaks, bursting out a shocking holy luster. Then, the divine light intertwined and gradually formed a huge battlefield. The battlefield was black and white, and it was incomparably huge. It was built on the void, shining with indestructible, eternal luster. As soon as it appeared, it attracted everyone's attention. The 36 golden paths led to the center of the battlefield from the peaks of the different peaks. This was the battlefield of Providence. The ranking battle of the junior tycoons was about to begin. When the battle began, the restrictive formation of the immortal God Mountain would automatically operate and move different experts to the battlefield to fight. The winner would not only be ranked higher, but would also be able to seize a part of the Great Way's Providence. It's about to begin. At the foot of the mountain, everyone's eyes were focused on the battlefield of Providence in the sky. The experts of the Wind Whisperer clan had prepared a thick stack of golden message tree leaves, intending to record the Providence that was about to erupt. The unparalleled battles on the battlefield. Chapter 1068. At the same time, the junior giants on the other mountain peaks looked at the central battlefield with unprecedented fanaticism. No matter how talented or shrewd they were, those who could stand on the list of junior giants were all young people under the age of 30. Who could remain indifferent at such a moment? As geniuses who had reached the top and surpassed their peers, they all had their own pride. In this battle for luck, no matter who it was, they would do their best. No one was willing to be below others. Fight! Fight for an earth-shattering victory. Suddenly, a strange buzzing sound rang out, shaking the universe. Under countless gazes, 2 of the 36 golden paths were rippling like a tide. The next moment, the junior giants standing in front of the 2 golden paths were moved to the central battlefield. They were a man and a woman. The man was tall, and his momentum was like ice and snow, emitting a bone-piercing chill. He came from the origin sect of Dongxing territory, and his name was Lai Wenliang. The woman was slim and graceful, like a lotus in a pond. She had delicate features, and wisps of purple light lingered around her, making her look ethereal. She came from the Tai Taoism school, and her name was Gu Liangping. Both of them were top figures that Lin Sun didn't know, but the fact that they could occupy a mountain peak and become one of the 36 junior giants was enough to prove their strength. Soon, the battle broke out without any suspense. The battlefield was full of divine splendor and treasure light. As soon as it began, an earth-shattering and fierce battle appeared. At the foot of the mountain, there was a constant uproar. On the mountain peak, Lin Sun and the other junior giants were also paying close attention. It didn't take long for the battle to come to an end. With a slight advantage, Gu Liangping defeated Lai Wenliang, seriously injuring him. At the same time, an illusory power of great Wei rushed out of the dragon tablet that originally belonged to Lai Wenliang and poured into the dragon tablet that belonged to Gu Liangping. Moreover, the immortal god mountain rewarded Gu Liangping, the winner, with an additional power of great Wei. This was how the battle for luck was like. Not only could they seize the opponent's great Wei luck, but they could also receive rewards from the immortal god mountain. Without sacred treasures and forbidden powers as trump cards, the competition is based on one's true battle prowess. Lai Wenliang is also extremely powerful, but the power of the great path he controls is slightly inferior to that of Gu Liangping. Lin Sun was lost in thought. The other minor giants were also evaluating Gu Liangping's battle prowess. They were thinking about how they would deal with and win against this woman. Soon, the second match began. It was Go Yinjin's turn. His opponent was a man named Gao Shanhai, who was from the Tianyin Dao sect in the West Hung realm. He was extremely powerful. Boom! The moment the battle began, Gao Shanhai took out his treasure and gave it his all. It was obvious that he knew how terrifying Go Yin was. Go Yinjin grinned ferociously as he pulled out a blood-colored whip. It had a total of 72 segments, and it was like a blood-colored spine. As soon as it was whipped, an extremely ear-piercing explosion resounded in the battlefield. His figure was wild and flamboyant. The blood whip soared into the air, releasing terrifying fluctuations of the Great Path. In just a dozen exchanges, he had suppressed Gao Shanhai. After more than 40 rounds, Gao Shanhai had been whipped until his entire body was covered in cuts and bruises, and many of his muscles and bones were broken. After more than 60 rounds, Gao Shanhai's head was smashed, and his body was forcefully blown apart by the blood whip. Whoosh, blood rained down, bathing Go Yinjin's figure in it. It made him look like a bloodthirsty demon, extremely terrifying. He's too strong. This black dog has actually comprehended the Great Path of Black Demon Azura, which is a rare power of the Great Path on the Supreme Path list. Its power is treacherous and ruthless. Although the Black Demon Azura clan is disgusting, I have to admit that this clan has a strong foundation. Go Yinjin is definitely a core character in the clan. At the foot of the mountain, there was a constant discussion. They were all shocked by Go Yinjin's brutal and fierce fighting posture. It was extremely difficult to defeat a powerhouse who was also a small tycoon like him, and it was even more difficult to kill him. But Go Yinjin could do this, which undoubtedly proved that the combat power he possessed was enough to rank in the top ranks in this battle for luck. No wonder he dares to be so arrogant and brutal. It turns out that he has something to rely on. Lin Sun's black eyes surged. He had a panoramic view of the battle, and finally had a rough idea of Go Yinjin's real strength. Lin Sun, you should know that you are the one I want to kill the most. You'd better wash your neck and wait for me. Suddenly, Go Yinjin let out a shout, and his scarlet eyes flashed with a cruel luster. Then, he was moved back to the Taoist altar at the top of the mountain. On the dragon tablet beside him, there was also a reward of the great path of luck. Look, what did I say just now? Even if Demon God Lin ranks in the list of small giants, he will be targeted and suppressed. At the foot of the mountain, many strong sects gloated. Lin Sun looked calm and unmoved. In this battle for luck, there were two people he wanted to kill the most. The first was Qing Wenwan, and the second was Go Yinjin. In the third battle, Yu Kong appeared on the battlefield. After dozens of rounds, he defeated his opponent. Compared with the time at the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival, Yu Kong had undoubtedly become more powerful. However, Lin Sun was not surprised. In his view, Yu Kong's talent and foundation were extremely outstanding, and he was born in a sage family. It was difficult for him not to become powerful after entering the pure land of longevity. In the fourth battle, Laughing at the Heavens won. In the fifth battle, Li Qingping won. In the sixth battle, one battle after another was carried out. Among them, there were some powerful figures that no one could ignore. There were even some unfamiliar ones, such as Zhang Feng, the successor of the 9 Wondrous Sword Pavilion in the Southern Profound World, and by Donglu, the descendant of the ancient Bai Fang clan in the Dongxing world, and so on. In fact, at this time, those who could rank 36th on the list of small giants were all very terrifying. In the 14th battle, Zhao Jingxian faced off against Tuoba Zei, the descendant of the Tuoba clan in the Dongxing world. Tuoba Zei was one of the more dazzling ones. His fighting style could be described as ghostly and swift like thunder. The spectators had long since remembered him. However, when he encountered Zhao Jingxian, he lost miserably. In just a moment, he had no choice but to admit defeat. The reason was very simple. Zhao Jingxian had displayed the ultimate technique of the spiritual treasure Holy Land, the myriad transformation scripture. As soon as this technique was used, Zhao Jingshuan's body turned into thousands of figures. The battlefield of luck was filled with her figures, and every one of them seemed real. Tuoba Zei's biggest advantage was his extraordinary speed. However, when he encountered such a scene, he was immediately at a loss. No matter how he attacked, he could not lock onto Zhao Jingshuan's real body. In the end, he could only admit defeat. When he saw this, Lin Sun couldn't help but recall the time he'd killed Gong Yangyu. Gong Yangyu had similarly cultivated the myriad transformation scripture. Unfortunately, Gong Yangyu was obviously too inferior when compared to Zhao Jingxian. In the 15th battle, Chu Beihai moved out. However, it seemed like fate made a fool of him, and he'd encountered the sword devil, Yi Chun. This battle drew the attention of many, and the battle was unprecedentedly intense. No matter if it was Chu Beihai or Yi Chun, both of them were influential figures amongst peerless figures. This battle between them could be said to be a battle between dragons and tigers. However, after over 100 moves, Chu Beihai was no match for Yi Chun in the end. Yi Chun's sword pierced through his chest, and he had no choice but to admit defeat. In my opinion, even if you have the chance to fight Lin Sun, you're bound to be no match for him. After the victor was decided, Yi Chun spoke abruptly. His words were like a thorn that pierced into Chu Beihai's heart, and it caused his face to sink while he was furious. Yi Chun smiled lightly, and he paid no attention to Chu Beihai before turning around and leaving. Chu Beihai grunted coldly, and he left with a bellyful of rage and unwillingness. He wanted to see what rank Lin Sun could ascend to. In the 16th battle, Jin Muyun's opponent admitted defeat. In the 17th battle, the golden path in front of Lin Sun abruptly rolled. It's finally my turn. Lin Sun only felt his figure shake, and then he was swept away by an invisible force. The next moment, he appeared on the central battlefield. Raising his eyes, Lin Sun looked at the opposite side, and then he couldn't help but be startled. At the same time, a figure who had been moved to the central battlefield with Lin Sun was also startled, and then he suddenly let out a feminine laugh. God is really kind to me to let me meet you in the first round. How lucky I am. His laughter was filled with maniacal delight. This person was dressed in a feather robe, and his appearance was handsome and enchanting. He was even more beautiful than a woman. His thin lips were like a burning red blade, scarlet and enchanting. It was Qing Wenwan, the holy son of Cyan Phoenix. Ha! There's a good show to watch. Qing Wenjuan's means are incomparably abnormal, and his combat strength is outstanding. Many small giants are extremely afraid of him. Who would have thought that Lin Sun would encounter him? He's really unlucky. In this way, Qing Wenwan is abnormal, and Lin Sun is a demon. Abnormal against a demon. This battle is bound to be wonderful. I'm looking forward to Qing Wenjuan's painting of Demon Lin into a bloody rose. That scene will definitely be amazing. At the foot of the mountain, the spectators were completely shocked. They had long seen Qing Wenjuan's abnormal strength, and Lin Sun's strength also surprised them. Now, the two met, which made many strong practitioners of ancient orthodoxies who were hostile to Lin Sun laugh gloatingly. Nothing was more exciting than the battle in front of them. At the same time, other small giants also showed different expressions on their faces. Some were playful, some were expectant, some were mocking, and some were gloating and laughing heartily. He met Qing Wenwan in the first round. This guy's luck is really bad. Zhao Jingxian couldn't help sighing faintly. She was not worried about Lin Sun. In other words, as early as in Xiao Empire, she had never worried about Lin Sun. This was not blind confidence, but she firmly believed that any opponent who underestimated Lin Sun would pay a heavy price. Similarly, in the face of any unoptimistic situation, Lin Sun never lacked the means to turn the situation around. The only thing Zhao Jingxian worried about was that Lin Sun might be forced to expose all his trump cards in advance after this battle. Trump cards were the key to winning by surprise. If they were exposed, it would inevitably arouse the vigilance of other strong practitioners. Lin Sun, what I said before still stands. As long as you kneel down and beg for mercy, maybe I will not harm your relatives and friends in a good mood. Chapter 1069. As soon as Qing Wenwan finished speaking, Lin Sun thought of Xiao Qinghe, who was regarded as a canvas and suffered cruel torture. The killing intent that had accumulated in his heart surged uncontrollably in his chest. I don't know whether God favors me or not. I only know that if you don't satisfy me this time, you won't be able to leave this battlefield. Lin Sun's black eyes were cold, and he said word by word. An invisible killing intent spread from his body like a tide, which changed his momentum. Qing Wenwan smiled. His feminine and enchanting face was full of madness as he said, "Demon Lin, I'll draw you a mandala flower. I'm sure you'll be satisfied." Boom! As he spoke, the two moved at the same time. Two figures turned into lightning and rushed at each other like two comets, bursting out dazzling divine light and roaring like thunder. A great battle broke out at this moment. In the battlefield, it was like two furnaces colliding, causing the void to tremble and the air to explode. The battlefield of Providence was completely filled with rolling haze and surging Taoist light. It was as vast as the ocean, and the collision of the supreme power changed the color of heaven and earth. So powerful. Comparatively speaking, this battle is undoubtedly the most intense so far. It's like a battle between the sun and the moon, and its momentum is amazing. At the foot of the mountain, all the spectators were moved. Other small giants standing on a mountaintop were also paying close attention. Now, they all knew how powerful Demon Lin was, but no one could give an accurate answer as to how powerful he was. Now, they might be able to find some clues in this battle. Boom! On the battlefield of Providence, the two sides suddenly separated. After a while, the place was restored to peace, and all kinds of divine light disappeared. The two figures stood in a distant confrontation, each standing on one side. Demon Lin is indeed worthy of being called the Demon Lin. I heard that you broke some records set by Yun Qingbai 10 years ago. If I kill you today, does it mean that Yun Qingbai 10 years ago is not as good as me today? Qing Wenjuan's eyes were surging with brilliant Taoist light flowing in them. As soon as these words came out, the experts of the heaven-reaching sword sect all looked terrible. How arrogant he was to compare Yun Qingbai. It was like a god in their hearts. Jin Muyun also snorted coldly. His eyes were fierce and unkind. You really think too much. Lin Sun's expression was cold. At this moment, many people noticed that even though the two of them were conversing, their imposing auras were imperceptibly rising swiftly and becoming even more terrifying. Lin Sun's clothes and black hair fluttered in the wind. It was as if a demon had awakened in his body. On the other side, the pores on Qing Wenjuan's entire body opened up while strands of divine radiance sprayed out. His entire body seemed as if flames were coiled around it, and it caused the nearby space to be warped and incinerated while his imposing aura shook the heavens. The atmosphere here had become oppressive. Even if they were very far away, it still caused many cultivators at the foot of the mountain to feel suffocated. Boom! Qing Wenjuan was the first to attack. His footsteps were calm as he stepped on the sky like a green lawn dancing in the heavens. An expanse of Tao patterns appeared at the center of his palm, and it surged with scarlet-red multicolored light as it struck forward with boundlessly terrifying power. At this moment, his aura was wreaking havoc, and his palm energy was dazzling and monstrous. It was as if a god had come out, shocking everyone present. Green Lawn Race's inherited extreme art, sky-splitting technique. An older generation figure said softly. He was moved. Almost at the same time, a large expanse of green divine light appeared on Lin Sun's side. His figure seemed illusory and ethereal, but erupted with unparalleled spiritual fluctuations. Bang! He clenched his palm into a fist and deduced the profundities of the 9 strikes for shaking the heavens. In an instant, space collapsed while the force of his fist seemed to have penetrated through time and space and erupted onto the battlefield. A deafening sound of collision resounded, and it was like a volcano had erupted. Both of them fought intensely. They were swift and fierce like bolts of lightning while exerting force that was like a mountain. Both of them revealed extraordinary combat ability, and their grasp of timing was exquisite to the extreme. They fully displayed the might of a true peerless figure. The foot of the mountain was perfectly silent while the spectators held their breaths in concentration, and their hearts shook. Even if it was the various great figures that stood on different peaks, they revealed serious and solemn expressions at this moment, and they didn't blink in the slightest as they were deeply afraid of missing the slightest detail. Bang! Qing Wenjuan's palm was like a pair of sharp blades that were coiled with crimson-red divine flames, and they sliced and tore apart space while blazing violently. Everywhere that met the eye, the wind from his palm was like fire, and it seemed to have transformed into a sea of flames. His movements were agile like a green lawn soaring through the sky, and he possessed an extreme speed that dazzled the eyes of others. Moreover, his aura was terrifying like a god that was bathed in flames. Lin Sun utilized the ice WYRM steps and similarly collided head-on with Qing Wenjuan with extreme speed. His fists were simple and natural, and they didn't carry the slightest aura of battle. But every single punch of his carried a might that shook the heavens and the earth, and he didn't dodge in the slightest. Right at this instant, the heavens and the earth were filled with the rumbling of the Tao, and it was like the furious cry of a green lawn and the shout of a fiend god resounded out. The two of them fought fiercely. Crimson divine flames and green divine radiance seethed, and they erupted with boundless light that enveloped the entire battlefield. Not bad, not bad. At this moment, Qing Wenjuan seemed to be extremely excited. His handsome and devilishly handsome face flushed with a sickly red color, and he roared with laughter while his aura grew stronger and stronger. Numerous ancient Green Lantern phantoms appeared around him while divine flames surged, and it was a world-shocking phenomenon. This was the embodiment of a secret technique of the Great Tao. This was the might of the supreme inheritance of the Azure Phoenix clan, Sky Split technique. The flames of the Green Lanterns could split the sky. However, even though he was strong, Lin Sun wasn't much inferior to him. Every single move he made carried boundless might that rumbled through the heavens and the earth, and the sky was in chaos. The battle between the two of them was really too shocking. It had just begun, but it had already revealed the power that far exceeded that of ordinary, peerless experts. The Tao was vast and mighty, and the rays of light were monstrous. Everyone was dazzled, their hearts swayed, and they couldn't help but gasp. Compared with them, those peerless figures who hadn't been ranked on the list of junior giants were undoubtedly too dim. This undoubtedly proved that at least on the path of peerless cultivation, both Lin Sun and Qing Wenwan had reached an astonishing height. The fact was indeed so. Qing Wenjuan's combat strength was absolutely at the top level among the 36 junior giants. Even some of the minor giants, who had already won the previous battles, were secretly shocked when they saw this. Many people even felt lucky that they didn't encounter these two people in the first round of the Battle of Luck. Otherwise, the consequences would be hard to say. Boom! Another collision resounded. The two of them had fought for hundreds of rounds up to this point. The battle was fierce and swift, and it was completely a head-on collision. It was so fast that many practitioners couldn't even clearly capture the details of the battle. Clang! Suddenly, Qing Wenwan took out a brilliant golden needle and stabbed it towards Lin Sun at an incredible speed. He had the sky-splitting skill and the sky-patching needle. This golden needle was his most powerful means of killing. Whoosh! In the void, the tip of the needle was like lightning, and the golden light was like rain. In an instant, the golden needle shuttled through the void, drawing thousands of sharp golden rays, like a big net, to shroud and cut Lin Sun. At this moment, even the peerless junior giants like laughing at the heavens, Ye Chun and Jin Miyun couldn't help but be shocked and realize the horror of the sky-patching needle. This Qing Wenwan from the Cyan Phoenix tribe of the Shiheng world is so powerful. It seems that there are many worthy of attention in this world besides the Dongsheng world. Even Yin Zhanxiu was a little surprised at this moment. Although Qing Wenjuan's performance was eye-catching before, he came from the Shiheng world after all, and was not well known in the Dongsheng world. But now it seemed that he was undoubtedly in existence that couldn't be underestimated in the desperate situation. Lin Sun is a little unlucky. Yin Zhanxiu thought to himself that it was really unfortunate for him to encounter Qing Wenwan in the first round of the Battle of Luck. But soon, Yin Zhanxiu didn't have time to think too much and focused his mind on the battlefield again. Whoosh, whoosh, the sky-patching needle glowed with golden light and danced in the air. Countless golden threads cut through the void, and they were so sharp that they seemed to be able to cut through everything. To everyone's surprise, Lin Sun was still barehanded in the face of such a murderous attack. However, the strength of his fist became majestic and boundless, like the raging waves of a boundless sea. When he punched out, merely the strength of his punch crushed the golden threads to the point they collapsed and dispersed in disorder. This was completely a method of breaking through technique with force. What was even more shocking was that Lin Sun had successfully suppressed the attack of the sky-patching needle. This caused many spectators to be moved. Qing Wenwan had displayed an extremely abnormal combat strength, but Demon God Lin actually surpassed him. Qing Wenwan, who was in the midst of battle, seemed to be a little impatient after failing to take down Lin Sun for a long time. He suddenly let out a low roar and swung his hand fiercely. Clang! The golden needle in his hand suddenly swept out and pierced through Lin Sun's fist at an incredible speed. It pierced through his fist and brought out a wisp of scarlet blood. At the same time, a wisp of icy and piercing power spread from the wound and stabbed at Lin Sun's divine sense like a bolt of lightning. This was the power of the sky-patching needle, which could attack one's soul. Cultivators who didn't understand it would definitely suffer a great loss if they were caught off guard. Obviously, Lin Sun was also hit. What? Demon God Lin is injured? In the distance, everyone was shocked. Everyone witnessed this scene, especially those who had fought with Lin Sun before. They knew how terrifying Lin Sun was. But now, he was actually injured by Qing Wenwan. How could the sky-patching needle of the Cyan Phoenix clan be so terrifying? Wasn't it said that the true mystery of this secret method had long been lost in ancient times, and what was left was only an incomplete version? Some of the older generation couldn't stay calm either. As for the junior magnates on the mountain peak, most of them looked grave. Some of the junior magnates who had grudges against Lin Sun were also a little surprised. Qing Wenjuan's strength was also beyond their expectations. At this moment, Qing Wenjuan revealed an excited and morbid smile. Without hesitation, he manipulated the golden needle and approached Lin Sun, intending to take advantage of this opportunity to start painting. He wanted to use Lin Sun's body as the canvas and his blood as the ink to paint a blood-color mandala. Just thinking about that bloody scene caused Qing Wenjuan's entire body to tremble with an indescribable excitement. In his view, Lin Sun's soul was destined to be seriously damaged under the assassination of the sky-patching needle. Soon, Lin Sun would become his work of painting just like how he dealt with Xiao Qinghe before. However, as soon as he approached and the sky-patching needle was aimed at Lin Sun, he suddenly stiffened and felt a strong uneasiness and palpitation. At the same time, he met Lin Sun's cold eyes, which were as deep as the abyss, as if he was staring at a dead man. Chapter 1070. Tomorrow. However, Goldfish was fearful and uneasy in her heart. The Goldfish had been maintaining a moderate update speed ever since the genius had started writing. Now that he had suddenly said that he was going to explode, he became exceptionally nervous. I'm afraid that when I explode, there won't be many responses from her former or current readers. I'm also afraid that if I explode, the monthly votes and data will be too pathetic and embarrassing. If that happens, it will be very embarrassing. It will also affect my enthusiasm. For a very long time, Goldfish had not asked for subscriptions or tried to break through the monthly votes. It wasn't that she didn't care. It was because there were too many trivial things in life. Her time was always out of her control. However, this time, Goldfish didn't intend to stay calm. Passion and motivation were needed in life. It was the same for writing a book. In July, Goldfish decided to explode, break through the monthly votes. Just like when she wrote about Talisman Emperor back then, she wanted to explode. Goldfish didn't know if her old friends who supported her were willing to fight alongside her. She also didn't know if her new friends who had grown up with Prodigy would be willing to support Goldfish. However, without support, would she not explode? No, since she had exploded. Even if she was fighting alone, even if she was charging forward alone, even if she seemed small and pitiful, this time, Goldfish had to fight till the end. This was the first time since Goldfish wrote Prodigy. She had asked for help from her readers. Goldfish was terrified. She was afraid that no one would care about her. Therefore, in this July, those who like geniuses and who like to see Goldfish explode, please come and support the Goldfish if you have the ability. If you have the monthly votes, smash them. If you don't have a monthly votes, subscribe and leave a message of encouragement. At the very least, this would let Goldfish know that she wasn't fighting alone. Kids, the Goldfish really needs your help and support this time, and the Goldfish will explode for you. After midnight on July 1st, Goldfish will release the first update. Today is the end of the month. From July 1st onwards, children who support Goldfish, please come and smash your monthly votes. On July 1st, no matter how many monthly votes you have, Goldfish will release 5 updates. With more monthly votes accumulated, you will continue to release 5 updates on the 2nd day. On the 3rd day, the 4th day, as long as you have enough monthly votes, it won't be a problem for you to continuously release more. It's time to raise the sails. Chapter 1071. Didn't the power of the sky-mending needle hurt him? How could it be possible? The sky-mending needle, the most precious treasure of the Cyan Phoenix branch, was almost lost. This treasure had the power to kill the soul, which was mysterious, strange, and cruel. Anyone who was hit by it would be seriously injured, even if he had a soul treasure. This was also the reason why Qing Wenwan dared to approach Lin Sun so fearlessly. But when he saw Lin Sun's eyes, Qing Wenwan realized that there was an accident this time. Without hesitation, he retreated violently. His ability to change was amazing. But how could Lin Sun, who had been waiting for a long time, let the prey escape? At the moment when Qing Wenwan retreated violently, he had already taken action. Boom! Lin Sun's punch, which gathered all his strength, suddenly burst out with infinite clear light. It was not only fast, but also incomparably terrible. With a bang, Qing Wenwan was smashed to the ground. His shoulder bone was broken, and his flesh and blood were flying everywhere. The ground shook a little. The spectators were astonished and shocked. Before, they all thought that Lin Sun was injured and was likely to be suppressed. But in the blink of an eye, he had launched a counterattack. Looking at Qing Wenwan, who was smashed to the ground by a solid punch, many people felt a pain in their hearts. This blow was simply too fierce. However, it had to be said that Qing Wenwan's reaction was extremely outstanding. After being smashed to the ground, he had no time to care about his injury and retreated immediately. At the same time, he spat out a red flame to block Lin Sun's attack. Boom! However, Lin Sun would not delay after seizing the first opportunity. He rushed forward with an unparalleled momentum. His punches were surging, and his attacks were fierce and overbearing. Puff! Soon, Qing Wenwan was hit again and spat out a mouthful of blood. He was shocked and angry. He screamed and ran the sky-splitting skill and the sky-mending needle with all his strength. Unfortunately, once the first opportunity was lost, he would fall into a passive position step by step. For a person at Lin Sun's level, he would not miss such an opportunity to suppress his opponent. For a moment, on the battlefield of Providence, Qing Wenwan kept retreating and fleeing back and forth in a mess, looking extremely embarrassed. Lin Sun, on the other hand, pressed Qing Wenwan step by step with a posture of chasing and attacking fiercely. Qing Wenwan was injured again and again. Everyone outside the arena was shocked and dumbfounded. Everything had turned around too quickly. Previously, the two of them were evenly matched, and there was no clear victor. But now, Qing Wenwan, who had just gained the upper hand, was being chased and beaten by Demon God Lin. His wretched appearance left many experts in disbelief. One wrong step, and every step will be wrong. Yi Chen's eyes were as bright as the stars, and a faint smile appeared on the corner of his lips. He had seen through the mystery within. I wonder how he neutralized the power of the heaven-repairing needle. More people were curious about how Lin Sun reversed the situation. The reason was simple. Restricted by the power of the undying Forbidden Land, Little Silver couldn't appear and help Lin Sun fight, but he was not affected in the sea of consciousness. Although the power of the sky-mending needle was unparalleled, it paled in comparison to Little Silver, who was a member of the spirit-eating insect clan and was able to destroy it effortlessly. Of course, Lin Sun wouldn't be affected. Unfortunately, Qing Wenwan didn't know this. Because of this negligence, or in other words, his overconfidence in the heaven-repairing needle, Lin Sun seized the initiative. At this moment, Qing Wenwan's handsome and devilishly handsome face was completely livid. He was mad with hatred and aggrieved to the point of going mad. A small mistake had turned the situation around, which made him want to slap himself. Why was he so careless at that time? Bang! Lin Sun rushed to Qing Wenwan and swept out his fist, which almost hit his forehead. Demon God Lin, do you really think you can beat me like this? Naive. Qing Wenwan couldn't hold back anymore and roared. At this moment, his whole body was fiery red, and his breath was terrible. His body was like a volcano, emitting bright, divine flames. He rushed out violently, and his palms and fingers were like wings, dancing with divine flames all over the sky, as if he was going to smash the sky. Bang! Lin Sun's decisive blow was blocked, which made his black eyes narrow. He realized that this guy was in a fight desperately. Boom! At the same time, Qing Wenjuan's entire body suddenly changed, and he transformed into a peerlessly handsome azure phoenix with jade green feathers. His sharp claws were like gold, and his entire body seethed with divine flames. He was like a real divine bird, fluttering his wings in the void, high and mighty, disdainful and frightening. Originally, I didn't want to use my trump card to deal with you, but now I'll let you see the real unique skill of my Cyan Phoenix clan. Qing Wenwan let out a clear cry and spread his wings like a pair of divine flame fans. The red wings were bright and dazzling. Whoosh! He swooped down, and his wings crushed the void, swift and fierce to an appalling extent. Lin Sun dodged, and a terrible explosion suddenly occurred at his original position. It was extremely turbulent, like a meteorite falling there with amazing destructive power. Some small giant's eyelids twitched. At this time, Qing Wenwan was obviously much stronger than before. He had used some kind of secret method, and his power was unpredictable. This is the 8 ultimate attacks of Cyan Phoenix, the supreme ancestral method of Cyan Phoenix. Some elders were surprised and couldn't believe it. Qing Wenjuan's performance made people have an illusion of a new understanding of him. Dodge? Haha, do you also know how to dodge? Didn't you have a good time chasing me just now? Qing Wenwan laughed wildly. His attacks became more and more violent, and each blow had great destructive power. The divine flames were like rain, burning the void and covering the whole battlefield. Seeing this, Lin Sun realized that it was impossible to hold back. A top figure like Qing Wenwan was not so easy to be suppressed. Boom! Without hesitation, Lin Sun's breath suddenly soared, and the profound meaning of Yazi's wrath was operated by him without reservation. Huh! Many strongmen's faces changed slightly. Did Demon Lin also hold back? Moreover, until now, he still hadn't used that magical broken sword. Why was that? Was it disdain or some other plot? Just when everyone was in doubt, Lin Sun had already rushed up and moved the void with ice drake steps. In a flash, he collided with Qing Wenwan. Boom! In the earth-shattering collision, Qing Wenwan screamed angrily. How can your combat power become so strong? At this time, people finally saw clearly that in the roar of divine light, Qing Wenwan, who had turned into a Cyan Phoenix, staggered and flew backward. Its wings were askew and fluttered in the void. There was a dead silence. Whether it was the spectators at the foot of the mountain or the small giants on the top of the mountain, they all looked at Lin Sun as if he was a monster. Only now did they find that Lin Sun had been holding back in the previous battle. The breath he showed at this moment was more than twice as strong as before. No wonder Qing Wenwan would be so shocked and furious. If it was anyone else that encountered this scene, that person would probably be shocked to the point of jumping up and down. Do you think I don't have trump card? I said that if you can't satisfy me today, you can't leave this battlefield. Lin Sun rushed forward, his black hair flying. At this moment, he seemed like a fiend god that looked down upon the world, and his entire body was enveloped by the brilliant green glow of the Tao. Originally, if he used the broken sword, it was enough to kill Qing Wenwan, but Lin Sun didn't intend to let this abnormal and cruel beast go so easily. Boom! On the battlefield, the battle became more and more fierce. However, the situation was reversed again. Lin Sun regained the dominant position. He chased after Qing Wenwan and punched him so hard that Qing Wenwan screamed angrily. It's really surprising. Laughing at the heavens couldn't help but be stunned. He didn't know what to say about Lin Sun's strength. The expressions of the others were almost the same. It was very complicated. This demon Lin was always unexpected, and this time was no exception. Qing Wenwan was abnormal enough, but who would have thought that Lin Sun still didn't reduce his demonic power? He was so fierce that he suppressed Qing Wenwan. What a loser! Seeing this, Jin Muyun, Li Qingping, Go Yinjin, and others were very unhappy. The stronger Lin Sun was, the more vigilant they were. Originally, they thought it would be good if they could use Qing Wenwan to defeat and eliminate Lin Sun. Who would have thought that even Qing Wenwan couldn't do it? I knew it would be like this. Zhao Jingxian shrugged her shoulders. Her clear eyes were calm, as if she was used to it. Perhaps she was the only one who understood Lin Sun's fighting style the best. If he could avoid using his trump card, he would never use it. He played the low-key style of pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger to the fullest. He didn't do it on purpose. It was an extremely clever tactical strategy. If he was seen through with a single glance, it would be bad. Plop. On the battlefield, under Lin Sun's overbearing attacks, Qing Wenwan was smashed hard on the ground. His wings were stained with blood, and he spat out blood from his lips. Even his body was trembling. He struggled to get up, but Lin Sun, who had descended from the sky, kicked him in the back. He was firmly stepped on the ground, unable to move. Qing Wenwan is finished. Many people sighed. Honestly, Qing Wenwan was very strong. He was even more amazing than some of the small giants who had just won. But he met Demon Lin, who didn't play by the rules, and suffered a crushing defeat. This shocked the spectators at the foot of the mountain, and they couldn't help but feel pity. Qing Wenwan was suppressed in the first round. His ranking on the list of small giants was destined to be lower. The strong practitioners of the Cyan Phoenix clan all looked terrible, and their eyes were about to burst into flames. Originally, they hoped that Qing Wenwan could be ranked in the top 10 of the list of small giants. But now, it was impossible for Qing Wenwan to raise his head. He was suppressed under Lin Sun's feet in a humiliating way, unable to move. You like painting very much, and I like roast chicken wings very much. Lin Sun opened his mouth and said something that made everyone feel puzzled. How could he say such nonsense at a time like this? But soon they understood. Lin Sun kicked the Cyan Phoenix, transformed by Qing Wenwan, and used his hands to pluck off all the feathers of Qing Wenwan in a short time. In the process, Qing Wenwan was so angry that he almost coughed up blood. He cursed angrily, but it was doomed to be in vain. In just a few breaths, Qing Wenwan's feathers were plucked off, and his whole body was clean and smooth. A pair of fleshy wings as crystal as snow was more than 30 meters long. What a wonderful ingredient! Lin Sun's black eyes brightened, and he exclaimed. Chapter 1072. Qing Wenwan was so ashamed and angry that his face turned green. He was the current holy son of Cyan Phoenix branch. He had a high status and was trained as a future lord. When had he ever been humiliated like this? Under the watchful eyes of countless talents of his generation, he was trampled on the ground and stripped of all his feathers, which made him choose to commit suicide. Yes, commit suicide. In any case, there was no true death on the undying divine mountain. Rather than being humiliated and tortured, it was better to die as soon as possible. As for fighting for luck and ranking, Qing Wenwan was not in the mood to care. If he continued to be humiliated, even if he lived in the future, he was destined to be a stain on his life. He would be laughed at by others and would never be able to lift his head again. However, when Qing Wenwan was about to take action, he suddenly found that his body was imprisoned by an obscure force. He couldn't even lift a finger, let alone commit suicide. This was the power of Basha prohibition. Before, Xiao Qinghe was defeated by torture and humiliation. How could Lin Sun let Qing Wenwan escape early this time? Even if it was suicide, it was not allowed. Demon Lin, do you really want to be my enemy? You should know that life and death can't be determined on the immortal mountain. If you go too far, don't you worry that I will pay you back tenfold? Qing Wenwan's handsome and enchanting face was twisted and ferocious as he threatened. Bang! The back of his head was hit so hard that he saw stars. His head felt dizzy and painful. Then he heard Lin Sun's calm voice. I haven't eaten roasted Cyan Phoenix wings yet. I must have a try today. Qing Wenwan was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Although he was a pervert, he could only torture his opponents. But Demon Lin Sun, wanted to eat him. Lin Sun didn't hesitate at all. Holding the broken sword, he cut off the 2 wings of Cyan Phoenix, which were more than 30 meters long. This pair of wings was bare, sparkling in translucent snow white, the flesh very rich. Lin Sun first activated the power of water, condensed water, and washed the bloodstains on the wings. Then he took out a bronze spear from the storage ring and strung the wings together. During this entire process, Qing Wenwan was in so much pain that he almost fainted. However, compared to this, the humiliation and resentment in his heart grew even greater. Everyone outside was stunned. What was Demon God Lin doing? Could it be that he was really planning to roast the azure phoenix wings to eat? Their minds were in a daze, and it felt very surreal. Boom! Under the astonished gazes of the crowd, Lin Sun's palm burst into flames and covered the skewered cyan phoenix wings. He skillfully roasted them, and from time to time, he rotated the bronze spear to avoid being burnt. My God! The scent of my azure phoenix bloodline is actually viewed as food? What a shame. At the foot of the mountain, the eyes of some people of Cyan Phoenix clan turned red. They couldn't wait to rush up and fight Lin Sun. Qing Wenwan being humiliated like this made them seethe with anger. The others all felt their scalps go numb, their eyes staring straight. How ancient and terrifying was the Green Wan race. This was especially true for Qing Wenwan. He was the holy child of the race's younger generation, his status venerated, yet he was actually reduced to food. Lin Sun's movements were swift. Moreover, he used the peerless Taoist method fire-smelting galaxy to roast the wings, and the effect was absolutely astonishing. In just a moment, the pair of cyan phoenix wings was roasted to a golden and glossy state. The aroma was rich, and the oil dripped into the flames, making sizzling sounds. The most miraculous thing was that the roasted wings were still glistening with auspicious light, and an alluring aroma of meat spread in spirals across the battlefield of Providence. The quality of this meat is really extraordinary. Lin Sun took a deep breath. He was also a little surprised. The aroma of the roasted cyan phoenix wings was unexpectedly wonderful. For ordinary people, eating a mouthful of it could prolong their lives. It was a treasure of great nourishment. Even for cultivators, being able to eat a mouthful of pure-blooded cyan phoenix meat was absolutely no different from gnawing on elixirs. At the beginning of cultivation, cultivators would often use the blood and flesh of various divine birds and fierce beasts to temper their physique and foundation. The rich aroma overflowed, and the cyan phoenix wings were overflowing with brilliant rays of light. The other cultivators couldn't help but swallow their saliva secretly. This sort of ingredient was absolutely a treasure of the heavens and the earth that was a great nourishment. At this moment, Qing Wenwan was already angered to the point of coughing up large mouthfuls of blood. He'd gone completely mad, and his Dao heart was on the verge of collapse while he roared furiously and screamed repeatedly. However, Lin Sun paid no attention to him at all, and he continued roasting the meat. As soon as he finished roasting the cyan phoenix wings, he swiftly chopped off a pair of claws, washed them clean, and started roasting them again. Fiend God Lin, you'll die a horrible death. At the foot of the mountain, the experts of the cyan phoenix race were angered to the point of roaring loudly, and they were on the verge of going mad. The other spectators from the various ancient sects were speechless. An unparalleled battle had been reduced to a barbecue in the end. Moreover, it happened on the battlefield of Providence, so anyone would probably be dumbstruck if they saw it. He really is a fiend god that stops at nothing. The cultivators that were hostile towards Lin Sun shuddered with fear and felt a chill run down their spines. Isn't he afraid of being stuffed to death by taking a genius that stepped foot onto the peak of the divine Tao realm as food? As for the junior magnates, they were all shocked by this scene with different expressions. Qing Wenwan was really miserable. He had thought that it would be a misfortune for Fiend God Lin to meet him. But who would have thought that it would be the real misfortune for him to meet Fiend God Lin? If this news spread to the outside world, even if Qing Wenwan could still live, how could he raise his head in the future? Anyone who saw it would be extremely shameful to think that he had once become Fiend God Lin's food. Puff! Qing Wenwan was so angry that he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood after suffering such humiliation and torture. His eyes rolled back, and he passed out directly. A dignified genius with a strong state of mind was so angry that he passed out. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they probably wouldn't have believed it. Clatter as Qing Wenwan passed out. a force of rules and order emerged and took him out of the battlefield of Providence. Even the cyan phoenix wings and cyan phoenix claws that had just been roasted by Lin Sun were taken away. Lin Sun, who had planned to have a big meal, was stunned and regretted it. He sighed, "Why do you compete with me for food? I haven't even tasted a bite." Everyone outside the arena was completely speechless. Was Fiend Godlin a foodie? In fact, Lin Sun really didn't want to eat Qing Wen Wan. He just used this method to avenge Xiao Qinghe. Whoosh! When Lin Sun returned to the Taoist altar on the summit, there were two more forces of fate on the dragon tablet where he was. One came from Qing Wenjuan's dragon tablet. The other came from the forbidden land of immortality. It could be clearly seen that the 4 dragon claws on the dragon tablet showed illusory golden luster at this moment, which complemented the dragon's tail. At this moment, the junior magnates on the other summits looked at Lin Sun with a hint of fear. Qing Wenjuan's tyrannical combat strength made many junior magnates nervous. They were secretly glad that they didn't meet him in the first round. Some junior magnates were even sure that if they met Qing Wenjuan, even if they tried their best, they would at most be injured. It would be extremely difficult to win. Fortunately, Fiend God Lin suppressed Qing Wenjuan. However, Qing Wenjuan was eliminated, leaving behind the even more terrifying Fiend God Lin. I can't fight with Lin Sun head-on. I should use my strength to overcome his weakness. Fiend God Lin has already displayed the power of water and fire. His punches, body movements, and palm techniques are all marvelous and powerful. If I want to defeat him, I have to. What's terrifying is that he hasn't used that broken blade. Is his trump card really just this? These little giants were all pondering in their hearts, silently recalling the details of the battle just now, using this to verify and compare. As the saying went, know yourself and know your enemy, and you can win 100 battles. Although Lin Sun was powerful, they also had their own means and trump cards. What they had to consider now was how to effectively suppress Lin Sun if they met him. In this battle, the change happened when Fiend God Lin dissolved the sky-repairing needle. He seemed to be injured, but in fact, he wasn't affected at all. The junior magnates like laughing at the heavens, Ye Chun, Jin Muyun, and Yuling Kong had more considerations. If they were of equal strength, the factors that would affect the outcome of the battle would fall on other aspects. However, when they thought of how Qing Wenjuan had been suppressed by Lin Sun despite having the upper hand with 8 supreme strikes of Cyan Phoenix, they couldn't figure it out. Back then, Lin Sun's combat strength had instantly risen to an unprecedented level. Had he deliberately held back his strength, or had he used some secret technique to stimulate his potential? This lad definitely has a trump card. In the end, they came to a conclusion. This made them look at Lin Sun with even more subtle expressions. It wasn't terrifying to have a powerful opponent. What was terrifying was not being able to see through the opponent. Without a doubt, in the eyes of these junior magnates, the strength Lin Sun had previously displayed had aroused their vigilance and fear. Of course, this wasn't because they were afraid. They each had their own trump cards to rely on. In a real battle, they might be able to suppress Lin Sun. The 18th battle began. It was Alu who stepped onto the battlefield. In just 10 minutes, his opponent was suppressed. He was beaten to the point that almost all his bones were fractured. He had no choice but to admit defeat. Alu's ferocious and domineering fighting style that crushed his opponent left everyone's jaws dropping to the ground. No one would have thought that this barbarian who had come out of nowhere would be a brutal figure on the path of sanctification of the body. This was already the last battle of the first round. There were a total of 36 top figures on the junior magnates list. After the first round of one-on-one battles, there were 18 victors and 18 eliminated. The ranking of the eliminated would be based on the amount of luck of the great path they had obtained from the coiling dragon steel and their performance on the battlefield of Providence. The victors would then proceed to the second round of battles. Whoosh! However, before the second round of battles began, colorful rain fell from the sky above the heads of Lin Sun and the other junior magnates, bathing them in it. This was the divine spiritual rain, unique to the immortal mountain. P.S. From last night until dawn, many people have tipped, voted, and left messages to encourage Goldfish. I'm really touched. Needless to say, the only thing Goldfish could do was write more words to repay the trust and support of her friends. Brothers and sisters, if you have tickets, please continue to spend money and make an earth-shattering scene. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Chapter 1073. The divine rain could restore a practitioner's injury and consumption to the peak state in an instant. Before the first round of battles began, a rain of deities had descended. Otherwise, no matter how outstanding a genius was, they wouldn't be able to withstand it if they continued to fight. Feeling the recovery of his cultivation, Lin Sun couldn't help sighing with emotion. The power of rules and order of the Immortal Mountain was really too magical and incredible. Taking a deep breath, Lin Sun began to think about the next duels. After the first round of duels, the 18 top talents had been ranked in the top 18 of the list of junior giants. In other words, the next duels would be for the top 18 positions. This kind of competition would undoubtedly be more dangerous and difficult. After all, it was extremely difficult to be ranked in the list of junior giants. Those who could stand out in the first round of duels were absolutely top-notch existences. Of course, there were exceptions, such as Chu Beihai, who was extremely unlucky to meet Sword Devil Yi Chun, and Qing Wenwan, who also met Lin Sun tragically. According to their real combat strength, if they weren't a little unlucky, there should be no problem for them to be ranked in the top 18 of the list of junior giants. However, this was the competition. Luck was also a kind of strength, or else these heaven's favorites wouldn't have gathered on the Immortal Mountain and fought to the death for the fortune of the Great Path. What's more, without luck, how could one become a king? In the second round, each junior giant has 3 chances to fight. Those who win 3 battles are destined to be among the best and can enter the final duel. Those who win 2 battles and lose 1 battle, even if they can pass the second round, their ranking can't be too high. Those who win 1 battle and lose 2 battles are destined to be eliminated. Those who lose 3 battles are destined to be eliminated. Lin Sun pondered and analyzed the rules of the second round of duels. There was no need for others to tell him. The power of rules and order of the Immortal Mountain had already imprinted the rules of duels on the coiling dragon steel. He could understand it with a little perception. According to the rules, no matter who you are destined to find an opponent who is sure to win. However, each person only has 3 chances to fight and only 1 chance to choose an opponent. The remaining 2 chances will be passively accepted by others. In this way, there are many variables. Lin Sun murmured in his heart. There were indeed many variables. For example, if Lin Sun appeared, he could naturally choose an opponent to fight. But in the same way, others could also choose Lin Sun to fight. This made it very difficult to determine which opponent he would encounter. Of course, he could also reject challenges from others. However, he had to pay a price for refusing. Every time he refused, a portion of the great Tao luck on his coiling dragon steel would be taken by the other party. If it wasn't necessary, then no matter who it was, they were bound to not choose to refuse. After all, the karmic luck of the Grand Tao wasn't easy to come by, so who would be willing to give it up? While Lin was thinking, other small giants were also analyzing in their minds. There were too many uncertainties and variables in the second round. No matter who it was, no one dared to be careless or underestimate it. Lin. As for Jin Muyun, Li Qingping, Yu Lingkong, and Go Yinjin, the first opponent that came to their mind after they understood the rules was Lin Sun. For different reasons, they all regarded Lin Sun as their enemy and wished to kill him as soon as possible. However, after calming down, they were somewhat hesitant. Witnessing Lin Sun's performance when he guarded the mountain, and witnessing the battle where he suppressed Qing Wenwan, they were shocked and fearful of Lin Sun's combat strength. In the second round, there was only 1 chance to initiate a challenge, and the other 2 rounds were full of variables. In order to prevent the worst from happening, the wisest way was to first choose an opponent that they could definitely win. What should we do? The rules of the second round are really disgusting. Whatever, I'll just adapt to the situation when the time comes. If there's really a chance to challenge Demon God Lin, then fight. Jin Muyun and the other three had different thoughts and made different decisions. This was to judge the situation. No one who could come this far was stupid. But in the end, no one made a foolproof plan, including Lin Sun, because there were too many variables in the rules of the second round. No one knew who would be the first to fight, and no one knew who would take the initiative to challenge. Under such circumstances, to a large extent, they could only adapt to the situation. For example, Jin Muyun and the other three wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to suppress Lin Sun. However, there were only 3 chances in the second round, and one of them was Lin Sun's decision. In this way, among the 4 of them, no matter who took the initiative or who took the initiative, at least one of them would not have the chance to fight with Lin Sun. In the worst case, they might not even have the chance to fight with Lin Sun. At the foot of the mountain, the spectators were also analyzing, but in the end, they all had a headache. There were too many variables. Suddenly, Lin Sun, who was thinking, narrowed his eyes. The next moment, he was moved to the central battlefield by an invisible power of rules and order. Obviously, the curtains had been drawn on the second round, and he was the first to fight. Seeing this, the expressions of Jin Muyun and the others changed slightly. Demon God Lin was the first to fight, and he was destined to choose one of them to fight. There was no need to think about it. At the foot of the mountain, the spectators were also surprised. Demon God Lin was the first to fight? Who would he choose to fight? Go Yinjin. Zhao Jingxian thought to herself. On the battlefield of Providence, Lin Sun's black eyes swept across. Every junior tycoon who looked at him had different expressions. Some were eager to fight, some were fearful, and some were dignified. Some even avoided looking at him, as if they were afraid of being chosen by Lin Sun. When Lin Sun looked at Jin Muyun, the latter snorted coldly, and a sharp sword light burst out of his eyes. When Lin Sun looked at Yu Lingkong, the latter's face was cold, and his eyes were filled with terrifying hatred. When Lin Sun looked at Li Qingping, the latter's expression was cold, and a provocative arc appeared at the corner of his mouth. Lin Sun paused for a moment, and finally moved his eyes away and fell on Go Yinjin. "Puppy, come over here." He waved his hand with a warm smile, as if he was summoning his pet. Sure enough, Zhao Jingxian smiled knowingly. Her clear and beautiful face was like a lotus after the rain, fresh and refined. This guess came from understanding, and it was also a kind of cognition that had never been wrong until now. The others more or less secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Honestly speaking, no one wanted to encounter Demon God Lin in the first battle. If they clashed with him, they might be able to win, but it would be extremely difficult. Of course, people like Ye Chun and Laughing at the Heavens were not affected at all. This came from their absolute confidence in their own strength. Whether they took the initiative to challenge or accepted the challenge passively, there was nothing to be afraid of. Lin Sun, do you know that you're courting death? Go Yinjin's face was gloomy. Being chosen by Lin Sun made him very uncomfortable. Was he a pushover in Lin Sun's eyes? Puppy, don't just bark. Come over here if you have the guts, Lin Sun said casually. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Lin Sun repeatedly called him a puppy, which made Go Yinjin's killing intense surge. He could no longer tolerate it. He suddenly roared to the sky, and with a flash, he rushed to the battlefield of Providence. Since you can't wait to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Go Yinjin's expression was grim. He was dressed in a black robe, and his body was surging with violent and wanton bloody light. He was like an Azura from hell, and his power was extremely terrifying. In an instant, everyone's gazes converged on him. Go Yinjin's methods might not be as abnormal as Qing Wenjuan's, but in terms of brutality, Qing Wenjuan couldn't compare. Countless geniuses had been torn apart by him while he was guarding the mountain earlier, and his brutal and bloody combat methods had long since left a deep impression on the spectators. Bang! As soon as he stepped onto the battlefield, Go Yinjin attacked. Obviously, he couldn't restrain his killing intent any longer, and he took a step forward, causing the void to become chaotic. He was like an Azura. One could clearly see that his long hair had actually instantly turned blood red, and his eyes were scarlet red, as if they were burning. His entire body's might was ostentatious and ruthless to the extreme. Slash! A long and narrow blood-red blade had suddenly appeared in his hand, and it flashed explosively through the void like a river of blood from the netherworld as it swept over. Rumble! The bloody light there blazed and rumbled incessantly, and the ghastly and overbearing killing intent through the wind and clouds in all directions. So strong. This is the strength of the Black Azura Dao. It's really terrifying. Everyone outside the battlefield held their breath with astonishment in their eyes. As soon as Go Yinjin attacked, he had already used his strongest means. Obviously, he had already known Lin Sun's fighting strength, and it was useless to test and hold back. It's time to use some other means. In fact, Lin Sun still had absolute confidence to kill Go Yinjin without using the broken blade. But in that case, he had to operate the profound of anger of Yazi and 9 strikes for shaking heaven to the extreme, which would be too shocking. Each of his trump cards was reserved so that no one could see through him. Clang! The broken blade, as white as snow, flashed in the air, and the surface of the blade was flowing with obscure Taoist patterns. In an instant, the sound of the blade resounded through the world like a tide. Reaching for the stars, Lin Sun's figure rushed violently, and the broken blade chopped down in the void under the control of his huge and unparalleled spiritual awareness. Bang! With a violent collision, the void in the battlefield was completely chaotic, as if the sun and the moon had collided together. The surging divine light spread, making the world roar. Kill! After one blow, the two didn't decide the winner. Without hesitation, they attacked again and exerted their own fighting strength. On the battlefield, it was like a bloody Azura and a demon were fighting for hegemony. They fought fiercely, and ghosts cried and gods howled. It was as if they had come to hell. How terrifying! If a half-step king realm expert approached, he would be killed in an instant. Is this the true power of the pinnacle? The spectators trembled in their hearts. Many people couldn't imagine that the confrontation of the supreme power would be so powerful and nature-defying, which completely broke their inherent understanding. Compared with this, the previous confrontation between Lin Sun and Qing Wenwan seemed inferior. Chapter 1074. Go Yinjin seemed to have transformed into an Azura of hell. His blood-red hair was burning, and his whole body was surging with blood-red light. Along with his attack, numerous phantoms of Azuras, Yakshas, and demons appeared in the void, and they roared at the heavens and the earth. In a trance, it seemed to have transformed into a purgatory, and Go Yinjin was the master, causing many spectators to tremble. Lin Sun's figure was ethereal, and the broken blade was like a heaven-defying weapon that emitted a myriad of starlight. It was like a waterfall of stars sweeping down from the sky, fierce, overbearing, and invincible. The two of them fought in the center of the battlefield, dazzling everyone and causing them to tremble in fear. Who do you think will win if they continue fighting like this? Go Yinjin uses the power of the Great Way of Black Sea, Azura, and the Senluo blood conversion scripture. Its lethality is shocking, so he has a higher chance of winning. That broken blade in Fiend God Lin's hand is a divine weapon. It's mighty, profound, and unfathomable. Moreover, he has already attained the Tao of water to the state of Tao truth. Every strike of his possesses tremendous and indestructible might. In my opinion, he'll probably have the last laugh. Actually, it's best if both of them are injured. Go Yinjin is disgusting, but isn't Demon God Lin also disgusting? Discussions arose, and the spectators held their own opinions. Boom! In the battlefield, Go Yinjin's eyes were scarlet. After a head-on collision with Lin Sun, he couldn't help but sneer. Lin Sun, you still intend to hold back your trump card at this time? Bring it on if you have any means. Don't make me look down on you. As he spoke, a blood-red whip suddenly appeared in his empty left hand. It was divided into 72 sections like a spine. With a slight shake, the whip shadows rippled in the void, and they evolved into phantoms of Azuras and Yakshas that attacked Lin Sun. Azura Whip. In an instant, Go Yinjin's combat strength skyrocketed again. His saber and whip attacks were like a storm that covered the sky and the earth, causing the expressions of many small giants to change slightly. At the same time, Lin Sun also felt great pressure. Compared to Qing Wenwan, Go Yinjin was obviously much stronger. It wasn't because his combat strength was stronger than Go Yinjin's, but the power of the Great Way of Black Sea Azura that he mastered was a special Great Way that was one of the 99 Great Ways on the Supreme Tao list. Bang, bang, bang. The broken blade was like a flowing light. After defusing the opponent's attack, Lin was also shaken back more than 30 meters. This caused all the spectators to gasp. They never imagined that Go Yinjin would actually be ferocious to such an extent that even demonic god Lin seemed to be on the verge of being suppressed. But Lin Sun's expression was calm. Inexplicable coldness surged in his black eyes, and he said, "A broken blade is enough to deal with you, a son of a bitch." Boom! On the battlefield, the two of them once again fought in close combat. The sky darkened and the earth darkened. The surroundings were covered in a boundless bloody mist, and all sorts of phantoms could be seen. At this point in the battle, what they were competing on was their foundations on the absolute path of the Tao. This sort of accumulation wasn't closely related to one's cultivation. Instead, it was related to the great Tao that one had grasped, the martial Tao secret techniques that one had grasped, and one's own combat experience and awareness. On the other hand, in terms of the foundation of the Great Tao, Go Yinjin's performance was undoubtedly more dazzling. Every strike of his blade and whip was like an Azura from hell conquering the heavens and the earth, and it was filled with unimaginable destructive force. On the contrary, Lin Sun fought with the broken blade from beginning to end. Although it was extremely fierce and domineering, his fighting means seemed to be too simple. Of course, this was just the performance on the surface. No one would be stupid enough to think that Lin Sun was only capable of this. Clang! After another collision, an ancient bloody rune appeared around Go Yinjin's body. With a frightening divine power, it merged with the bloody sharp blade in his hand. In an instant, dozens of Azura souls rushed out of the bloody sharp blade. They were well-armed and fierce, and their murderous spirit pierced through the world. This was a kind of fatal blow, known as the forbidden secret power of the Sanluo blood conversion scripture. It was said that if it was used by a real Azura, it was enough to make ghosts and gods despair. Lin Sun, I'd like to see how you can block this blow. Go Yinjin laughed with his bloody hair flying in the air. He looked like a great Azura galloping in the purgatory. Don't you want to know my trump card? I'll satisfy you. A cold light flashed in Lin Sun's black eyes. With a buzzing sound, the broken blade rushed into the sky, and the obscure Taoist runes suddenly flashed on the blade. In an instant, people only felt a tingling pain in front of their eyes, as if a lightning tore the chaos and appeared in the world. It was so bright and blazing that people dared not to look at it directly. Crack! A long gap was torn in the sky above the battlefield. Then, everything seemed to be still, and all sounds and movements seemed to disappear. Only a flash of lightning-like, resplendent saber light shot out from the silence. Silence cut. At this time, Lin Sun finally used the fourth cut of the 6 cuts of Tianyuan. Puff, 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 puff. More than a dozen Azura war god phantoms that charged forward were instantly slashed apart. Their bodies exploded and turned into a rain of light that fluttered in the air. What a powerful strike! Quite a few people's hearts trembled. They were stunned by the power of this strike. Go Yinjin's scarlet eyes shrank, and then he laughed. Is this your strongest skill? Just SOSO. He rushed forward at a high speed without retreating. His whole body flashed with bloodlight. With a long roar, he launched another fierce attack. Before, he was a little afraid of Lin Sun because he couldn't figure out Lin Sun's trump card. But now, he roughly knew Lin Sun's trump card, and the trace of fear in his heart disappeared completely. He ran the power of Black Nightmare, Azura Path, and Sanluo Blood Scripture to the extreme. He became more and more powerful. At this time, they had fought for more than 500 rounds. It was time to decide the winner. Go Yinjin's scarlet eyes were full of killing intent. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Seeing this, Lin Sun stood still. His black eyes were deep, and the figure of Go Yinjin was reflected in his pupils. He pressed his fingers together. Whoosh! In an instant, a ray of bright light swept out from the broken blade. This slash seemed illusory, swift like a bolt of lightning, and filled with unimaginable destructive force. It was too fast. It seemed to break the shackles of time and space and penetrate the shackles of heaven and earth. When this cut swept out, most people outside the battlefield had no time to react. Even Go Yinjin only noticed it when the slash approached. Then his hair stood on end, and his scalp almost exploded from shock. Almost driven by instinct, he made a defense. Unfortunately, it was still a step late. With a puff, he flew upside down with his left arm cut off. On his chest, there was a straight wound. His skin and flesh were torn, and his bones were vaguely visible. Scarlet blood poured out. With a plop, his body rolled to the ground and screamed painfully. At this moment, the whole audience was silent. Everyone's eyes were wide open with a look of horror and disbelief. It was really too fast. Before, Go Yinjin had gained the upper hand. His offensive was like a gale, and his figure was like a Jura at night, violent and wanton, attracting the attention of the audience. But in the blink of an eye, he was seriously injured. Many people still didn't believe it and couldn't help rubbing their eyes, thinking that they were dazzled. On the other hand, the hearts of even more people shook, and they felt a strand of indescribable terror. That slash from before was actually unable to be captured by them, and this undoubtedly proved that the speed of that slash had arrived at an astounding level. But Go Yinjin was seriously injured by this attack, which showed that this attack was not only fast, but also terrifying. This was life and death cut. A snap of the fingers was 60 moments, and a moment was 900 lives and death. Life and death cut was derived from the essence of life and death in an instant. Life and death could be separated in an instant. Its speed and fierceness could be called unparalleled. It was absolutely the strongest attack of 6 cuts of Sky Yuan that Lin Sun had mastered at present. Lin Sun hadn't really used this move since he comprehended it. It was the first time that he used it on Go Yinjin. Of course, Lin Sun still had some reservations. Otherwise, if he integrated the power of Yazi's fury, fighting Saint Method and Star Obliteration devouring Wei into this attack, the power would be far more than this. But even so, Go Yinjin had been seriously injured. How could it be? Go Yinjin was shocked and angry. His face was pale, and he was panting. He crawled on the ground and couldn't stand up. The skin injury was not terrible. What was terrible was that the power of the cut was so fierce that it rushed into his body and raged, causing him to suffer far more serious injuries than what he looked like. This was what frightened Go Yinjin the most. What was the power of that cut? How could it be so horrible? How could Lin Sun give Go Yinjin a chance to breathe? He rushed to Go Yinjin without hesitation and was about to capture him. But Go Yinjin let out a vicious grin, and his whole body was steaming with bloody light, exuding an extremely dangerous aura. Lin Sun's pupils shrank. He suddenly stopped and then rushed to the back. At the same time, he ran the broken sword with all his strength to defend in front of him. Even if I lose, I will drag you down with me. Go Yinjin roared, and his body exploded under the horrified gaze of the crowd, like a volcano that had been silent for countless years erupting at this moment. The whole battlefield was covered by endless bloody light, which made the world shake and produced a deafening roar. It was so horrible that Go Yinjin used some kind of forbidden skill to self-destruct. No one had expected this. However, this move was cruel enough. Under the restriction of the Immortal Mountain, it was impossible for him to die completely even if he self-destructed. In this way, it was enough to give Lin Sun a fatal blow. Whether it was the spectators at the foot of the mountain or the small giants on the top of the mountain, they couldn't calm down at this moment. This battle was so dangerous and terrible that people felt their souls trembling and palpitating when they saw it from afar. especially Go Yinjin's self-destruction at the end. It shocked those small giants and made them gasp. Many people secretly rejoiced that they weren't fighting against Go Yinjin this time. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Is Demon Lin still alive? In the shocking and palpitating atmosphere, many people fixed their eyes on the battlefield of Providence, where bloody light was steaming and full of destructive aura. I'm afraid it's over. Jin Muyun, Li Qingping, and Yu Linkong couldn't help but gloat. Go Yinjin was a pinnacle existence among the absolute peak figures. How could the power of his self-destruction be so easily blocked? P.S. It's been updated 4 times. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for your support, votes, and messages. Chapter 1075. No one expected Go Yinjin to really self-destruct, including Zhao Jingxian. Her heart couldn't help but constrict when she witnessed this scene, and her fair and slender hands couldn't help but clench tightly while her clear eyes stared fixedly at the battlefield of karmic luck. Even though she was extremely confident in Lin Sun, she couldn't help but worry at this moment. His methods are too despicable. It's a disgrace to be ranked with him on the minor giants list. Yichen frowned as disgust rose in his heart. It was just a battle for the minor giants list. Everyone could rely on their own methods, but Go Yinjin had done such a sinister and vicious thing. Yichen didn't like it. Unscrupulous and has no bottom line. This Go Yinjin really isn't a good person. It's a pity for Demon God Lin. If he's eliminated, the following battles won't be interesting, laughing at the heaven's side. At the foot of the mountain, the sects that were hostile to Lin Sun were eager for him to be eliminated, while the neutral sects were shocked by Go Yinjin's ruthlessness. However, it made sense after thinking about it. The Black Sea Heavenly Dog clan had a bad reputation, and they were notorious. However, there were many reasons why they could survive in the ancient Desolation region until now. Most importantly, this clan was vengeful and vicious. Not only were they vicious to their enemies, but they were even more vicious to themselves. Just like this battle, even though Go Yinjin had been defeated, he had already displayed his ferocity. If anyone met him in the outside world in the future, they would think about what had happened today. No one would be willing to go against such a ruthless person who dared to exchange his life for another. Look, Demon God Lin is still alive, someone suddenly exclaimed. At the same time, everyone who had fixed their eyes on the battlefield of Providence also saw that as the bloody light faded, a figure appeared. It was Lin Sun. However, he looked like he was bathed in blood. His face was pale, his clothes were tattered, and he was coughing violently. He looked miserable, but he was still alive. Everyone was seething as if they had witnessed a miracle. He's still alive? Jin Muyun and the rest were shocked and in disbelief. Originally, they were still gloating, but now, it was as if they had eaten a dead fly. There was no need to mention how uncomfortable it was. Impossible. At the foot of the mountain, the members of the Black Sea Tengu race roared. Their eyes were red. Go Yinjin had paid such a huge price, but he still couldn't pull the other party down. This was unacceptable to them. What a pity. The ancient orthodoxies that were hostile to Lin Sun could not help but shake their heads. They felt depressed. This demon god Lin's life was really tough. I knew you wouldn't be eliminated, but you were seriously injured. Zhao Jingxian breathed a sigh of relief and couldn't help worrying about Lin Sun. At this time, there was no god spirit reign to help heal his injuries and recover his strength. In this way, once Lin Sun was targeted by his opponent in the next duel, his situation was bound to be not optimistic. Sure enough, in an instant, Zhao Jingxian keenly noticed that some small giants looked at Lin Sun subtly. It was as if an experienced hunter had set his eyes on his prey. It was especially so for Jin Muyun, Li Qingping, Yu Linkong, and the others. They didn't conceal their killing intent at all and were eager to make a move. If I have a chance to fight first, I'll definitely choose one of them to fight first, so that Lin Sun can have more time to recover his strength. Zhao Jingxian secretly made up his mind. Suddenly, Alu, who was on another mountain, shouted, "Devil God Lin, you can't be a coward. I, Alu, only have you and Xiao Qinghe as friends in the East Victory region. If I have the chance to attack, then I'll surely help you get rid of an opponent. Jin Muyun and the others immediately looked gloomy. This barbarian's words were obviously aimed at them. Almost at the same time, Sword Devil Yetchen also spoke. Lin Sun, do you need help? If you're eliminated, wouldn't it be too unpleasant for me to drink alone? This was the second time he had spoken up for Lin Sun. He was complaining about the injustice. Jin Muyun and the others looked even more gloomy. They didn't expect that Yetchan would value Lin Sun so much. On the battlefield, Lin Sun stopped coughing, wiped off the blood stain on the corner of his mouth, and said with a smile, "No need. It's just a minor injury. It's not a problem for me." What a boast. Many spectators almost rolled their eyes. Even a fool could see that demon god Lin was covered in blood and his breath was on the verge of disorder. How could this be a minor injury? He's afraid of making a fool of himself and being targeted. After all, there are still 2 more matches. Injured, he's destined to be the best prey. Some people analyzed and appeared very confident, as though they had seen through Lin Sun's thoughts. Lin Sun didn't say much and returned to the Taoist altar at the summit. However, just as his figure landed, he staggered and his body swayed as he coughed violently. Look, he can't hold on much longer, right? If someone were to make a move now, they would definitely be able to defeat demon god Lin easily. Many spectators became excited. There were also people who sighed. Go Yinjin was too ruthless. Not only did he self-destruct, he even caused demon god Lin to suffer. Demon god Lin originally had a chance to strive for the highest ranking, but now it was likely impossible. Lin Sun ignored them. He sat cross-legged on the ground, took out elixirs, and poured them into his mouth like they were free. This made people even more certain that demon god Lin's injuries must be extremely serious. Only Zhao Jingxian was a little suspicious. In the past, no matter how serious his injuries were, Lin Sun would never show it so obviously. He would rather endure it than let others see any clues. How are your injuries? She couldn't help but transmit her voice to him. Lin Sun coughed repeatedly, his face pale. He said with difficulty, "I'm already in this state. Can't you tell?" "Really?" Zhao Jingshuan's clear eyes widened, feeling a little nervous. "At least, it shouldn't be a problem for me to last until the end of the second round, right?" Lin Sun blinked. Although his face was pale, there was a hint of a smile in his black eyes. "You're such a jerk." Zhao Jingxian glared at him fiercely, her tone angry. However, the worry between her eyebrows faded and was replaced by a touch of joy. "Don't make a sound. I like to see who can't help but jump out first." Lin Sun hurriedly transmitted his voice. Zhao Jingxian rolled her eyes and said, "How long are you going to pretend?" "It's best if I can pretend until the end." Lin Sun's words were originally a little sinister and black-bellied, but he said it matter-of-factly. Zhao Jingshuan's expression was strange as she nodded inconspicuously. However, she was muttering in her heart, "I haven't seen him for several years. When did this guy become so sinister? He couldn't have really been led astray by Old Toad, could?" While they were talking, Lin Sun's coiling dragon steel suddenly gained 2 strands of Great Way luck. One belonged to the reward of the immortal God Mountain. The other strand came from the defeated Go Yinjin. However, this strand of karmic luck of the Grand Tao seemed to be exceptionally strong. In just an instant, it actually caused the dragon section on the stone steel to light up with a bright golden glow, and it was extraordinary and miraculous. Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed in surprise. At the same time, there was an uproar in the field. It turned out that the power of Great Way luck that lingered on the coiling dragon steel on the Taoist altar where Go Yinjin originally stood had all disappeared at this moment. He used a forbidden method and violated the rules and order of the immortal God Mountain. He was disqualified from the second round. That is to say, his ranking in the first round will also be affected, and it is very likely that he will fall out of the top 18. That's for sure. Similar things have happened in the past. Demon Lin got a blessing in disguise. The Great Way luck that was originally obtained by Go Yinjin now belongs to Demon Lin. There was a burst of discussion, and many people looked at Lin Sun with complicated gazes. Compared to the Great Way luck on the coiling dragon steel, Lin Sun could undoubtedly be ranked first. Of course, the battle for luck was not over yet. Being ranked first now might not be able to maintain it in the end. Some of the small giants who originally saw Lin Sun as their prey could not control their impulses at this moment. Lin Sun was currently seriously injured and weak, but his Great Way luck was the best. If they could defeat him, they would definitely be able to seize the power of luck far beyond ordinary. Facing these gazes, Lin Sun only frowned and coughed, occasionally spitting out a mouthful of blood, as if he was seriously injured. "He's too pretentious," Zhao Jingxian criticized in her mind. "If I can obtain such an opportunity, not only will I be able to completely defeat Demon God Lin, but I'll also be able to seize his great Tao providence. It can be said to be killing two birds with one stone." However, anyone can see this point. I wonder which lucky person will be the second to appear and get a great bargain. Li Qingping murmured in his heart. Suddenly, he felt his body being enveloped by an invisible force. The next moment, he appeared on the battlefield of luck. Li Qingping was slightly dazed. He felt like he had been struck by a pie from the sky. He felt an indescribable sense of joy. The heavens were watching over him. He held back his laughter and tried his best to control his joy, trying his best to maintain a cold and stern appearance. If others were to see that a peak figure like him would take advantage of Lin Sun's misfortune and bully the weak, it would not be honorable if word got out. It's actually him. Many of the small giants were envious, as they secretly cursed Li Qingping for his luck to snatch first place. At the foot of the mountain, the spectators also sighed. They were unsure if Demon Lin was unlucky or lucky. If he was unlucky, he had survived Go Yinjin's self-destruction. Furthermore, he had obtained all the Great Way luck that originally belonged to Go Yinjin. But if he was lucky, the second to fight was Li Qingping. If it were anyone else, they might not have been able to bear it and would not have attacked him. But Li Qingping was different. This peak figure from the Zhangmei Daoist sect had made no attempt to conceal his killing intent towards Lin Sun long before he ascended the mountain. Under such circumstances, even a fool knew what choice Li Qingping would make. Indeed, Li Qingping's eyes were like lightning as he locked onto Lin Sun. His lips curled into a cold arc as he said indifferently, "Lin Sun, although your injuries are severe, you should know that this is a battle for luck. Within the rules, even if you're on the brink of death, you have to fight me on the battlefield today." P.S. Here's the 5th update. Today's harvest was huge. Monthly votes, support, messages, encouragement. Goldfish was extremely touched. Brothers and sisters, thank you so much. Chapter 1076. Everyone cursed Li Qingping for being shameless in their hearts. He might have put it nicely, but he was just trying to take advantage of others. Everyone knew that, so why did he have to be so hypocritical? Li Qingping did not know what they were thinking. Even if he did, he could not be bothered. He would be an idiot not to take advantage of others. When cultivating to seek the Tao, one had to fight for resources, fortuitous encounters, and fight for karmic luck of the heavens and the earth. Who would hand over such a great opportunity? Moreover, Li Qingping had sufficient reason to do so. His younger brother, Li Qinghuan, had been killed by Lin Sun. This reason alone was enough for him to not let go of the opportunity to suppress Lin Sun. "All right, since you want to fight, I can't refuse. Let's fight then." Lin Sun stood up shakily, took a deep breath, and rushed into the battlefield of Providence. The moment he landed, he could not help but pant rapidly, looking extremely weak. Seeing this, everyone could not help but sigh inwardly. Demon God Lin was really unlucky. He had been so domineering before, but now he was so weak that it was unbearable to look at him. Seeing this, Li Qingping almost could not suppress the joy in his heart, but he said coldly, "Lin Sun, let me tell you in advance. In my eyes, there is only friend and foe. There is no difference in strength. I won't show any mercy when we fight later." Lin Sun nodded. "Of course. Then go to hell." Li Qingping attacked without hesitation. With a wave of his sleeve, purple Taoist light surged, turning into a dazzling purple hand that covered the sky and smacked down. In order to prevent any unforeseen events, he did not hold back and used his true strength to kill Lin Sun in one strike. Only then could he achieve the greatest deterrent effect. Even a lion would use its full strength to catch a rabbit. From this point alone, Li Qingping did not let his guard down because of Lin Sun's injury. This was undoubtedly the combat demeanor of a true powerhouse. Lin Sun's figure flickered, and he narrowly avoided the attack. However, he staggered a little, making many people sweat for him. Boom! The palm print missed and exploded on the ground with astonishing momentum. However, Li Qingping's expression was a little ugly. It was a little embarrassing to not be able to kill the extremely weak demon god Lin in one strike. He took a deep breath and pressed his palm forward again. The dazzling palm print covered space and flowed with the glow of the Tao. Its might was clearly much stronger than before. Lin Sun's figure flashed and dodged in a thrilling manner. Although his figure was a little embarrassed, he was not hurt at all. Demon God Lin's combat sense is so strong. Many people clicked their tongues. The previous two dodges made many believe that Fiend Celestial Lin would be smashed to smithereens. Who knew that he would miraculously dodge it? Li Qingping, can you do it or not? Do you really need to put in so much effort just to deal with a severely injured dog or chicken? Jin Muyun sneered and ridiculed. Li Qingping grunted coldly while his expression was gloomy, and killing intent surged in his heart. He suddenly took a deep breath and circulated a peerless Tao art. Boom! A bright golden phantom appeared above him. It was over 100 m tall, had 6 arms, and had a dignified appearance. It was like a god from the ancient legends, and it emitted a terrifying aura that shook the world. The vast Si Dao Sex Metal Spirit Phantasm art. Some of the older figures were shocked. Was there need to use such a powerful Dermic Tao to deal with an extremely weak Fiend Celestial Lin? Despicable. Shameless. Many people criticized silently. Fiend Celestial Lin was already so weak, yet he still used such a terrifying Dermic Tao art. It was clearly too much. If it were in the past, Zhao Jingxian would definitely be infuriated. However, she appeared especially calm at that moment. She even looked at Li Qingping with a hint of pity in her eyes. Boom! 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 The golden phantom surged up with 3 heads and 6 arms spinning. Its fingers were either clenched into fists, formed seals, formed sabers, or pressed into the air as a palm. In an instant, the golden fist force seal, finger force, and palm wind were like a torrential downpour that filled the void and poured down. Such a scene could be said to shake the heavens and the earth. Lin Sun's figure was immediately enveloped by it. Just as everyone thought that he was about to suffer a calamity and could not bear to watch, they were astonished to discover that Fiend Celestial Lin was not dead. He constantly dodged. His figure was in a sorry state as he staggered and swayed. However, he was always able to avoid the torrential bombardment by a hair's breadth. Everyone was dumbfounded. Wasn't his combat awareness and adaptability way too strong? He was still able to dodge despite being so injured. If he was not injured, how could Li Qingping be his match? Haha, Li Qingping, aren't you ashamed? That fellow is already so injured, and yet you can't do a thing to him. What a disgrace. Yulin Kong scoffed as well. At that moment, Li Qingping's expression was so gloomy that it was about to drip water. Being mocked in such a manner infuriated him. Boom! He charged out explosively, and behind him, a bright and dazzling golden phantom waved its 6 arms, respectively developing 6 different types of Tao arts. This level of might was already sufficiently overbearing. Ignoring the fact that he could kill an extremely weak Fiend Celestial Lin, he could even put up a real fight against other minor magnates. However, what happened next left him somewhat dumbfounded. He saw that Fiend Celestial Lin, who could not be blocked or evaded, was about to be blasted to death. Who would have thought that a single palm strike from Lin Sun would resolve the overwhelming offensive force? Rumble. The sound of the collision resounded as the dissipating golden glow swept out with a rumble. A rain of light scattered. Lin Sun could not help but cough violently, but he still said in surprise, Why is he so weak? Did you deliberately go easy on him? Everyone was astonished as well, feeling greatly surprised. Could it be, as Fiend Celestial Lin said, that Li Qingping was being merciful and did not use his true strength? Mercy my ass. Li Qingping's lips twitched as he flew into a rage. He wished he could strangle Lin's son to death. The most hateful thing was that at that moment, Jin Muyun and Yu Linkong mocked him again, saying that he could not even deal with a seriously injured Fiend Celestial Lin and that he should just commit suicide. Clang! Li Qingping attacked again, this time with a silver halberd. At that moment, even Alu could not stand it any longer. He sneered loudly. Look, you're even using the Imperial weapon. This is the first time I've seen such a funny thing. Bah, how shameful. Shut up. Li Qingping could no longer hold back his anger and shouted. Then, he brandished his halberd and charged at Lin's son. Compared to before, this strike was undoubtedly more terrifying. Bang! However, just when he was halfway to Lin's son, a broken blade suddenly swept across the sky, shining with cold light. Li Qingping's pupils shrank, and the scene of Go Yinjin being defeated flashed in his mind. His heart palpitated. Did Fiend Celestial Lin want to use his trump card at all costs to destroy himself? Not daring to be negligent, Li Qingping turned from offense to defense. He swung the silver halberd and developed a bright light curtain in front of him. But the broken blade seemed to lose its strength halfway and fell to the ground with a clang. All the people present were stunned. Time seemed to stand still. Li Qingping, who was ready to attack, had performed his defensive means perfectly. But what he got was such an embarrassing scene. His face suddenly turned red, and the blue veins on his forehead bulged. He was frightened by a seriously injured and weak guy. Outside the arena, roaring laughter broke the awkward silence. However, the laughter was like poisonous thorns stabbing into Li Qingping's heart. With a livid face, Li Qingping stared at Lin Sun, who was gasping in the distance. He tried his best to control his anger and said word by word, I will let you die miserably. Bang! The silver halberd danced in the air, splashing hundreds of millions of lights, making the world roar and the void explode. Everyone realized that Li Qingping was completely enraged. The might of this strike caused the hearts of some of the minor heavyweights to jerk, and they were extremely moved. Clang! On the ground, the broken blade trembled as if it was struggling to rush up, but it couldn't. Everyone sighed in their hearts. Was Fiend Celestial Lin so weak that he couldn't even control his own treasure? You are at the end of your rope. Why are you still struggling? Die! Li Qingping's face was cold. He had rushed to Lin's son, and the silver halberd, wrapped in waterfall-like light, chopped down. However, halfway through the attack, his eyes suddenly popped out and glared at Lin's son. Before he finished his words, his body suddenly split from the top of his head, as if he was cut in half by a sharp knife. This sudden scene caused everyone to be horrified. Their pupils dilated, and they were shocked to the point their hearts almost stopped. What happened just now? Plop! Plop! Li Qinghuan's body fell to the ground in two halberds, staining the ground red and turning it into a pool of blood. The silver halberd in his hand also fell to the ground with a clang, which was particularly harsh in the dead silence. Was he dead? The audience was silent, and their scalps were numb. Most of them didn't see how Lin Sun attacked just now. Whoosh! At this time, the broken blade flew back to Lin Sun's palm, which attracted everyone's attention. They suddenly realized something, and their expressions changed. At this time, Lin Sun coughed violently and sighed, although I'm seriously injured, I can still fight. What's more, my treasure is controlled by the power of the soul. Why are you so careless? Fortunately, this is the immortal mountain. You still have a chance to live. Be careful next time. As soon as these words came out, many people's lips twitched. It sounded like a sarcastic remark. Jin Muyun, Yu Linkong, and others were already shocked and doubtful. They even doubted whether Lin's son was really injured. This guy is so insidious. Thinking of the scene of the broken blade falling to the ground just now, many people already knew that Lin's son was definitely tricking Li Qingping on purpose in order to numb him. To be able to defeat an opponent despite being seriously injured, this guy is too strong. Some of the smaller tycoons felt their hearts churning. From the beginning, people thought that Lin Sun was doomed, but the result caught everyone off guard. It was absurd and horrifying. Li Qingping was a peerless figure. Even if he fought with Demon God Lin in his peak state, he could at least fight fiercely for a while. But this time, he was killed in confusion, which made people speechless. Chapter 1077. Li Qingping's defeat was really unjust. From the beginning of the battle, although he didn't neglect Lin Sun, he had subconsciously regarded Lin Sun as a seriously injured person. In short, he seriously underestimated Lin Sun, so much so that when he was killed, he was still in a daze. Lin Sun, you're despicable. When the battle ended and Lin Sun returned to the Taoist altar on the top of the mountain, Li Qingping's exasperated and furious roar suddenly sounded in the field. Different from Go Yinjin, who was eliminated because he violated the rules, Li Qingping was not eliminated and was resurrected by the rules of the Immortal Mountain. At this moment, he was trembling with anger, standing on the top of the mountain and roaring. However, although he was resurrected, his breath was extremely weak, like a lamp running out of oil. Everyone sighed endlessly, and they understood Li Qingping's rage very well. If it was anyone else that was killed in such a careless manner, that person would probably go mad as well. Lin Sun also sighed and said with pity, Li Qingping, you've lost. Why do you have to be so stubborn? If I were you, I would definitely seize the time to restore my strength in case others take advantage of the situation. Take advantage of the situation. Everyone's eyes became strange. Didn't Li Qingping also want to take advantage of the situation before? But in the end, he was reduced to such a situation. The most subtle thing was that Li Qingping was even weaker than Lin Sun at this time. If someone challenged him at this time, it was indeed no different from taking advantage of the situation. Lin Sun's words also made many small giants look at Li Qingping stealthily, as if they were staring at their prey. Li Qingping felt uneasy all over, and his face kept changing. He was so angry that he was about to go crazy. He never thought that he would be reduced to such a situation. Wait and see. He stared at Lin Sun with resentment, and then withdrew his eyes. He took a deep breath, sat cross-legged, and began to recover. Go for wool and come home shorn. Ha ha. In the distance, Alu was laughing wildly. His voice made Li Qingping so angry that he almost had a stroke. He made up his mind to find a chance to kill this barbarian in the future. But very quickly, Li Qingping's body stiffened, and his head almost exploded, because the next person to appear was the barbarian Aluka. He quickly lowered his head and looked down, praying in his heart that this barbarian would not do something like looting a burning house. Unexpectedly, as soon as Alufu stepped on a battlefield, he shouted impatiently, Li Qingping, get over here. Everyone's expression changed, and the corners of their lips twitched. This really was the heavenly Tao, and retribution was coming. Li Qingping was going to be unlucky again. Lin Sun almost burst out laughing. Li Qingping raised his head with great difficulty. His face was livid and stiff as he said word by word, Is it fun to bully the weak? Do you dare to fight me after I recover my strength? Alu spat on the ground and shouted, I like to bully the weak. Otherwise, how can I be your grandfather? Get down here. You. Li Qingping nearly stomped his foot in anger. You what? Grandson, is this how you address your grandpa? Alu yelled. The whole audience clicked their tongues. This barbarian was really stupid. No matter what, Li Qingping was a little giant at the top. Wasn't he afraid of offending him completely? I admit defeat in this battle. Li Qingping took a few deep breaths to restrain his anger. His voice seemed to be squeezed out of his teeth. After that, his face was cold and gloomy to the extreme. He admitted defeat. Everyone was shocked. No one had expected that a top powerhouse would admit defeat in such a humiliating manner. Coward. Trash. Coward. A man without balls. On the battlefield, Aluka was very dissatisfied, and he spouted nonsense. Li Qingping was already aggrieved enough. At this moment, he almost couldn't help fainting. The third match ended so hastily, which made people not know whether to laugh or cry. Originally, Li Qingping thought that he could seize some time to recover his strength. He never thought that Yi Chun, who appeared in the fourth match, would also challenge him with a smile. All of a sudden, he was dumbfounded. The others also looked strange. They wanted to laugh, but dare not. It was very hard to hold it in. Yi Chun, you're a figure from Ziwei Divine Mountain and have the title of Sword Devil. Isn't it too shameless to do this? Li Qingping trembled with anger. Yi Chun said with a smile, what I cultivate is to follow my heart. I don't care what others think. Didn't you say before that within the rules, there are only enemies, no strong or weak? Why are you slapping your own face now? Li Qingping was almost choked. Too much grievance had accumulated in his heart, and he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. I admit defeat. Li Qingping's voice was full of grief and indignation. It resounded through the world and moved those who heard it. Jin Muyun and Yu Lingkong couldn't help but feel sad. It was so tragic. Li Qingping was also a little giant among the top figures and had an extraordinary identity. But he was defeated by Lin Sun first, and then he was forced to admit defeat twice in a row. If this was spread out, he would become the laughingstock of the world. At this point, Li Qingping was also eliminated and stopped in the second round. His ranking could only hover around the 18th place at most. This demon god Lin is simply a maleficent star. Whoever goes against him will be unlucky. Someone muttered, yeah. First there was Go Yinjin, who violated the rules and was expelled. Then there was Li Qingping, who was eliminated in a muddle. It's really strange. Many people sighed with emotion and looked at Lin Sun in a different way. Don't make irresponsible remarks. This is not luck. Isn't demon god Lin seriously injured now? Maybe it will be his turn to repeat Li Qingping's mistake. Someone snorted coldly. As if to confirm this person's words, the fifth little giant also directly challenged Lin Sun. This person was a descendant of the ancient Bai Fong clan. His name was Bai Donglu. He wore a golden feather battle suit and looked extraordinary. Lin Sun was very straightforward this time. Without any nonsense, he came to the battlefield. I'm different from Li Qingping. I won't show any mercy. You should be careful. Bai Donglu looked indifferent with a kind of restrained pride. I won 2 games in a row. If I can continue to win this one, I should be able to enter the next round. Lin Sun's face was still very pale, but what he said made Bai Donglu frown. He said, don't you think too much? Lin Sun took a deep breath and pretended to be firm. I just want to tell you that I will try my best to win this battle. In other words, you should be careful. Bai Donglu's face darkened. He felt it absurd that a seriously injured person dared to boast so shamelessly. Cut the crap. Let's fight. Bai Donglu roared and soared into the sky. His skinny body emitted a blazing golden light, like a golden thunderbolt that streaked across the sky. Everyone held their breath and watched nervously. Everyone could see that Lin Sun was seriously injured. But at the same time, if he tried his best to attack, his counterattack would be extremely amazing. Boom! Bai Donglu's power was extremely fierce. He held a giant hammer flowing with thunder and lightning and smashed it at Lin Sun. The void burst into disorder. Lin Sun stood there without moving. The blood and chi around his body burned like a clear divine flame that illuminated the entire sky. His expression was firm and ruthless, and it seemed like he was going to risk his life. Clang! The bright and illusory broken blade struck out, making a clear sound. It was silence cut. With a clang, this fierce blow was resolved by Bai Donglu's hammer. He sneered. Do you think I will be fooled like Li Qingping? You underestimate me too much. Boom! As he spoke, his figure was extremely fast like a golden rainbow. His whole body was glowing, and the thunder and lightning giant hammer in his hand pressed down on the void. In an instant, it was like a thunder tribulation pouring down on the battlefield. Everyone gasped. None of the small giants who could enter the second round of the battle was weak. Compared with Li Qingping, Bai Donglu was not inferior, even stronger. He was calm and experienced in both offense and defense. Obviously, he treated Lin Sun as a formidable enemy and never underestimated him. At the same time, Lin Sun's performance almost made people's jaws drop to the ground. Instead of retreating, he brazenly confronted Bai Donglu. Boom! With the sound of collision, the two fought fiercely. In a flash, they had fought hundreds of times, completely head-on, fierce and ruthless. He was suppressed immediately. Everyone looked as if they had seen a ghost. Soon, an unexpected scene happened. In the battle, Bai Donglu was shaken and staggered back. His whole right arm was convulsing, and he gasped because of the pain. "You're not hurt?" Bai Donglu cried. Bai Fang was famous for its strength and speed in ancient times. Moreover, he was still in his peak state, but in the collision, he was a little overwhelmed. I said, "I'm fighting desperately." Lin Sun was very serious. In the end, a trace of blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. Humph! Bai Donglio's face was gloomy, and his aura surged. In an instant, he was surrounded by thunder and lightning, and even his eyes were filled with lightning. His entire being was dazzling like a son of God bathed in thunder and lightning. This was the secret method of Bai Fang, which was extremely amazing. If it were other practitioners, they would be directly killed by the thunder and lightning. Even the top figures could not resist it. However, when Lin Sun raised his hand, the broken blade swept through the air and performed the life and death cut. With an incredible flash of the blade, a wound was torn on by Donglio's body, and blood splashed. Even if you're fighting desperately, you can't be so strong, can you? Bai Donglu shouted again, shocked and angry, and couldn't believe it. Everyone outside the field was also shocked and doubtful. Indeed, Lin Sun didn't look like a serious injury at all. He was even more powerful than a healthy person. Lin Sun coughed and frowned. "Well, is it because you're too weak?" Bai Donglio's face suddenly darkened, and he shouted. His body suddenly turned into a three-legged Bai Fang bird, bathed in golden thunder and lightning, and spread its wings to attack. Every blow was like a lightning punishment, covering the battlefield with boundless horror. But just a moment later, he was hit by the life and death cut again. His chest was almost broken, and a shocking scar was dripping with blood. Bai Donglu flapped his wings in a pathetic manner to avoid being killed by the slash. This time, he was completely enraged after encountering danger. He yelled hoarsely, "Fiend God Lin, you're a big liar. You've been scamming me all along." Chapter 1078. Bai Donglio's voice was full of anger, grievance, and sorrow. He swore to God that he had never underestimated Lin Sun since the beginning of the battle, and he had exerted his full strength during the battle. He was confident that it was more than enough to deal with the seriously injured Lin Sun, but he never thought that he would be injured again and again since the beginning of the battle. This was driving him crazy. Seeing this, the others outside the city were also speechless. Demon Lin was so incredible that he could fight to such an extent even though he was seriously injured. Who could believe it? You are also a peerless figure. Can't you see how seriously injured I am? Lin Sun sighed, as if he had been misunderstood. Bai Donglio's face changed constantly. He could naturally see that Lin Sun's qi was in disorder. His face was pale, and every inch of his body was full of scars. Moreover, he coughed up blood from time to time, which made it hard to believe that he was not injured. What's more, this is a duel. Victory or defeat depends on your strength. Don't you seem incompetent to care about this? As soon as Lin Sun said this, Bai Donglu jumped up and became more and more furious. "Fine, I'd like to see how long you can fight." Boom! He attacked again. His golden wings were flowing with thunder and lightning, pouring between heaven and earth at an amazing speed and destructive power. But it didn't take long for Bai Donglu to be injured again. Before he could get angry, Lin Sun rushed forward and pressed him to the ground with a palm. Plop! The ground shook, and Bai Donglu screamed in pain. His wings were broken, and his body was bleeding. With a clang, the sharp broken blade had reached Bai Donglio's neck. His face was full of anger, frustration, and unwillingness. He couldn't believe that he would be defeated by the seriously injured Demon Lin. It was a great blow to him. "Admit defeat now, and I'll spare your life. Otherwise, I'm afraid you will be robbed like Li Qingping," said Lin Sun. Bai Donglu was stunned, and then his face changed greatly. He said subconsciously, "I admit defeat." As soon as he said this, he couldn't help but feel ashamed and resentful. He wanted to find a hole to hide in. It was really shameful. He was defeated and humiliated, which made him suffer a great blow. Lin Sun put away the broken blade, exhaled a long breath, and said easily, 3 wins, 3 wins. Finally, I don't have to fight anymore. Bai Donglu couldn't help but ask, "Are you injured?" Lin Sun was stunned and asked, "Is it important?" Yes, is it important? Since he had already lost, there was no point in asking these questions. Bai Donglu smiled sadly and staggered away from the battlefield, his back lonely. With your combat power, you can defeat him head-on. Why do you have to trick him like this? Zhao Jingshuan's voice came to Lin Sun's ears. Lin Sun said as he returned to the top of the mountain, "Cheating? I'm really injured, but it's not that serious. They were blind to challenge me. I didn't do it on purpose. How can this be called cheating?" Zhao Jingxian secretly despised him. He didn't want to admit it after doing it. This guy's skin was much thicker than before. At that moment, everyone outside the arena had solemn and doubtful expressions. Demonic God Lin was just too powerful. He had won 3 out of 3 battles. It was shocking. Most terrifying of it all was that he'd successively defeated Li Qingping and Bai Donglu while suffering such severe injuries, and it seemed to be extremely inconceivable. He must be faking it. Some people gnashed their teeth, thinking that Lin Sun deliberately tricked them. It's also possible that his injuries aren't as serious as they seem on the surface, and we've all been deceived by him. Some of the seniors analyzed. No matter what the situation is, he has already obtained 3 victories and is bound to pass the second round of the test. He can compete for the top 5 in the end. Some people sighed with emotion. Demonic God Lin had successively fought 3 out of the first 5 battles, and he'd won every single one of them. His speed of advancement could absolutely be said to be the fastest in the arena. It wasn't long before the 6th battle began. It was Laughing at the Heavens who entered the arena, and his opponent was Zhan Feng from the 9 Profundity Sword Pavilion. After 300 rounds, Zhan Feng admitted defeat. In the 7th round, Jin Muyun's opponent admitted defeat. In the 8th round, Yulin Kong's opponent admitted defeat. In the 9th round, battle after battle unfolded before the curtains were drawn. All of the battles were extremely intense. Every single one of these little heavyweights that had stepped foot into the absolute peak could be said to be abnormal. The battles they fought just happened to be like the sun and moon competing for brilliance. And it was extremely brilliant. The spectators outside the arena were dazzled by the sight of it, and they frequently erupted with exclamations of surprise. Some were overjoyed, and some were dejected. However, all of this had nothing to do with Lin Sun. He'd already successively carried out 3 battles without losing a single one, and he was firmly capable of entering the 3rd round. At this moment, he was meditating calmly. Goyen had really detonated himself, and it had indeed caused him to suffer an injury. At that time, if he hadn't circulated the energy of the devouring star path in time to deal with the force of the explosion that assaulted his face, it was very likely that he would have suffered a true injury. Even then, he'd still suffered from the impact, and his skin had cracked inch by inch while densely covered in scars. It was an extremely terrifying sight. Of course, these were merely superficial injuries. As he meditated, Lin Sun's eyes were calm like a bystander that silently watched every single battle that occurred on the battlefield. His extremely enormous divine sense was like tentacles that covered different angles of the battlefield, and it accurately captured every single detail of the battle that erupted on the battlefield. His mind was clear and tranquil. In his sea of consciousness, the spirit of the spirit was repeatedly deducing the details of every single battle, and then he brought his own battle awareness into it to compare. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you'll never be defeated. Lin Sun was not arrogant enough to look down on his peers in the world, but at the same time, he wouldn't belittle himself. At least so far, among the top junior giants who had successively ascended to the battlefield, only a few people had attracted his attention. Or in other words, he couldn't see through them. Laughing at the Heavens was one of them. In 3 consecutive battles, he broke out in unprecedented combat strength. His blade was like anger, and he would defeat his opponents easily within 10 moves. He was called Crazy Blade, and his saber intent was also wild and unruly, with a sense of freedom and unrestrained. Wherever his blade pointed, it seemed that it could break all shackles. His performance shocked the whole audience, and he was incomparably dazzling. He was regarded as the most promising figure to win the first place on the Junior Giants list. The Sword Devil, Yi Chen, wasn't inferior in any way. His sword Dao was upright, brilliant, boundless, swift and fierce to the extreme, and vigorous to the extreme. A single strike of his sword could shock even ghosts and gods. The two top junior giants who fought with him were both suppressed within 3 moves and had to admit defeat and leave the battlefield. Jin Muyun was also extremely amazing. As the leader of the younger generation of the heaven-reaching sword sect, his swordsmanship was as domineering as fire, and he was like a sword king sweeping through the universe. Yu Lingkong, Ji Xingyao, every single one of them possessed peerless might, and they were like numerous suns that competed in brilliance, and they revealed extraordinary elegance. Moreover, Lin Sun had learned from the discussions in the field. The peerless Taoism was divided into 3 levels. First glimpse of the door, next level, and reaching the peak. Practically all the top 18 pinnacle experts that were able to be ranked in the top 18 of the second round of the battles were at the stage of ascending to the next level. Top figures like Laughing at the Heavens and Yi Chun had begun to touch the realm of reaching the peak, and their combat strength was even stronger. Of course, this was just the difference in the Taoism. In a battle, under the situation of equal cultivation, the competition was based on one's own martial cultivation. And martial cultivation was inextricably linked with fighting awareness, fighting methods, and the power of the Great Way. It was impossible to have a precise standard of classification. In particular, the strength of the junior giants was not much different from each other. If one wanted to stand out, it would depend on the trump card he had. After a full 6 hours, the second round of the duels came to an end. In addition to Go Yinjin, who was eliminated first, and Li Qingping, who lost 3 battles, there were also several junior giants who lost all the battles. There were only 4 people who won 3 battles, namely Lin Sun, Laughing at the Heavens, Yi Chun, and Jin Muyun. There were 6 people who won 2 battles, namely Zhao Jingxian, Ji Xingyao, Alu, Yu Lingkong, Gu Lianping, and Qi Chongdo. There were 6 people who won 1 battle out of 3. According to the rules, they were doomed to miss the 3rd round of the duels. The 3rd round of the duels would be divided into 2 types. One was to compete for the 5th to 10th place, which was participated by the 6 junior giants who won 2 battles out of 3. The other was to compete for the top 4, which was participated by Lin Sun and the other 3 junior giants. That was to say, the 6 people, including Zhao Jingxian, Yu Lingkong, and Ji Xingyao, were no longer qualified to compete for the top 4. Knowing this result, Yu Lingkong suddenly became mentally unbalanced. His face was gloomy and his eyes were surging with terrible hatred. Originally, he was extremely eager to defeat Lin Sun in this duel and wash away the shame, but the result was a blow to him. He was not even qualified to compete with Lin Sun. Moreover, he was destined to be ranked lower than Lin Sun. There was no doubt that under such circumstances, he would be suppressed by Lin Sun in the end, let alone wash away the shame. How could Yu Lingkong be willing to accept this? Damn it! Yu Lingkong gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. This duel is not a crime of fighting. Ji Xingyao sighed faintly in her heart. She was also a little unwilling. Previously, she had challenged Laughing at the Heavens in the 1st round. She had tried her best, but in the end, she was still inferior and failed to win. It was also because of this duel that she lost the qualification to compete for the top 4. Zhao Jingxian, Alu, and the others looked as usual. It was already a good result to be able to make it to the top 10. Gu Lianping and Qi Chongdo also looked a little unwilling, but in the end, they could only suppress the unwillingness in their hearts. Damn it! That demon god Lin is so cunning, but he can still compete for the top 4. This is not fair. Someone shouted at the foot of the mountain. It was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples. Some of the experts from the ancient orthodoxies who had been hostile to Lin Sun for a long time, began to shout. Yes, if Demon God Lin didn't cheat and make Li Qingping fall into his trap, how could he possibly win? With Demon God Lin's combat strength, he is not qualified to compete for the top 4 at all. Almost all of these people who were shouting and criticizing Lin Sun were forces like the Pure Land of Longevity, Xianwen Sword House, and Holy Land of Spirit Treasure. They were fighting for Yulin Kong, Ji Xingyao, and the others. When other cultivators heard this, although they didn't agree with it, they agreed with it in their hearts. After all, whether it was laughing at the heavens, Ye Chun, or Ji Miyun, they all stood out by relying on their true combat strength. But in the last 2 duels, Lin Sun's method of winning was full of criticism, so he suffered a lot of criticism. They felt that he was not qualified to compete for the first position. Chapter 1079. Once a person was frustrated and angry, he would accommodate others. Even the practitioners were no exception. Lin Sun's existence undoubtedly gave those who hated him an outlet to vent their anger. They began to criticize him one after another. Lin Sun was qualified to be ranked in the top 4 of the list of junior giants, but he didn't enjoy the glory brought by such a ranking. On the contrary, he caused so much criticism. In the final analysis, it was nothing more than that Lin Sun was easy to bully. He was alone and didn't belong to any sect. Naturally, he didn't have the power to make those ancient orthodoxies fear him. This obviously showed how difficult it was for a single person to rise up in the ancient desolation region that was controlled by the various ancient sects. Seeing this scene, Lin Sun suddenly smiled. Standing on the Taoist altar on the top of the mountain, he looked down at all the people in the field. Uncharacteristically, he became extremely domineering and said coldly, "Those who don't attract jealousy are mediocre. The ancients didn't deceive me. I, Lin Sun, have traveled through mountains of corpses, seas of blood, and dragons' pools and tigers' dens. Everything I have today can be witnessed by heaven and earth, the sun and the moon. You're not qualified to judge me." His indifferent voice resounded through the world. All the people in the field were stunned. The voices of criticism and criticism were also suppressed. In a trance, they all had an illusion of being awed. What a good heaven and earth can be witnessed by heaven and earth. Yi Chen's eyes lit up. You can be regarded as one of us only by this boldness. Xiao Wutian's eyes were full of surprise. Zhao Jingxian smiled. Her teeth were sparkling, her lips were moist, and her clear and beautiful face was shining. Her beautiful clear eyes were full of rippling splendor as she looked at Lin Sun. This was the Lin Sun she knew. He had always been so different from the world. Bullshit, Ji Xingyao murmured to herself. However, she was also a little touched at this moment. Everyone knew that Demon God Lin was courageous and famous. But who knew how much blood and sweat he, a young man from the mortal world, had paid for this? "You're still so rampant." Yulin Kong snorted coldly. He was more and more displeased with Lin Sun. At this moment, Ji Miyun suddenly raised his voice and said, "Lin Sun, you'd better not boast like this. Be careful not to be slapped in the face later." "Slapped in the face? Do you deserve it?" Lin Sun looked indifferent. "Even Yun Qingbai doesn't dare to talk to me like this. You're courting death." Ji Miyun's face sank. At the same time, the expressions of the cultivators from the Heavenly Sword sect at the foot of the mountain sank. This kid actually dares to look down on Yun Qingbai? He simply deserves death. Courting death? Lin Sun smiled coldly. "If you can block 3 of my moves later, I'll lose." The audience was shocked. 3 moves? How arrogant. Even laughing at the heavens, and Yi Chun couldn't help but raise their eyebrows. "All right, good, all right." Ji Muyun was so angry that he laughed. His entire body emitted an extremely sharp sword intent, and a cold light shot out from his eyes. "I'll be waiting." How arrogant. Back then, when Yun Qingbai looked down upon a younger generation and was known to be invincible, I'm afraid even he didn't dare to boast like this. At the foot of the mountain, Yin Zhanxiu sat with his legs crossed on a boulder. His back was straight, and his expression was as calm and indifferent as before. He had seen Lin Sun's performance before. Although he was unwilling, he had to admit that he had underestimated Lin Sun at the beginning. The fiasco of Qing Wenwan and Li Qingping even made him a little vigilant. He was not surprised by Lin Sun's demon-like combat strength, but he suddenly found that he had never completely seen through Lin Sun's strength. His fighting style is demon-like. His shrewdness is as deep as a ravine, but he is so bold and unafraid of the secular world. If he rises, he will be accompanied by endless storms and troubles. Thinking of this, Yin Zhanqiu's eyes flashed with unprecedented firmness. Junior sister Jing Xian must not have anything to do with him. In the last round, the first one was the duel between the 5th and 10th of the junior tycoons. The rules were very simple. After the duel, the 3 defeated junior tycoons would be ranked 8th, 9th, and 10th according to their luck. The 3 victorious junior tycoons needed to duel with the other 2 respectively. According to the final results, they would be ranked 5th, 6th, and 7th. The duels soon began and attracted the attention of the whole audience. But for Lin Sun, laughing at the heavens, Chun, and Jin Miyun, they could sit on the platform and watch the duel calmly. Even laughing at the heavens, and yet Chun took advantage of this time to close their eyes and meditate quietly, ignoring everything that happened outside. Seeing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but feel a little touched. Being able to meditate in such an environment required extremely tenacious and clear Taoist heart. Why did practitioners practice in seclusion? In order to avoid being disturbed by the outside world, they could concentrate all their mind on making a breakthrough. However, if one's state of mind was strong enough, he could stay calm no matter whether he was in a mountain of knives, a sea of fire, or a bloody purgatory. Whether they practiced in seclusion or not, it would not affect them. Lin Sun was naturally able to achieve this as well. What moved him was that peerless figures like laughing at the heavens and Yechan were already standing at the peak of their peers, yet they were still able to adhere to their Taoist hearts and make the best use of any time to cultivate. Such a persistent and formidable will was sufficient to move others. One was not afraid of opponents who were better born, more talented, and more talented than one. One was afraid of opponents who had innate advantages and were more diligent and hard-working than one. Perhaps it's because of this that they can have such attainments on the path of Taoism. Lin Sun was lost in thought. Accumulating bit by bit might not be able to change anything. But when accumulating to a certain extent, there was bound to be a time when stones were piled up into mountains and rivers flowed into oceans. It's a worthwhile trip to have such figures to fight in the battle of the junior giants. Lin Sun finally understood why laughing at the heavens, and yet Chun thought so highly of him. The reason was very simple. They regarded him as a senior. At this moment, Lin Sun also regarded them as a real opponent. No matter the result, he looked forward to a good fight with them. Thinking of this, an invisible fighting spirit surged from Lin Sun. Almost at the same time, laughing at the heavens, and yet Chun, who were meditating on the top of the other 2 mountains, seemed to sense something, and they opened their eyes and looked towards Lin Sun. When he sensed Lin Sun's fighting spirit, laughing at the heavens' long and narrow eyes that were like a blade quietly flashed across. Yechin smiled slightly and said silently, "If you want to drink with me, you should go all out in the battle. I won't be merciful then." Lin Sun smiled and said, "As you wish." Humph. Ji Miyun also noticed this scene keenly. As a top figure who was also qualified to compete for the top 4, he naturally saw the change in Lin Sun's breath. There was an invisible fighting spirit in Lin Sun. However, Ji Miyun was very disdainful. Lin Sun had said before that he would defeat him in 3 moves. Ji Miyun regarded this contemptuous and arrogant attitude as an insult and couldn't bear it. It didn't take long for the battles on the battlefield of Providence to end, and the rankings were determined. 5th, Ji Xingyao. 6th, Zhao Jingxian. 7th, Alu. 8th, Yulinkong. Gu Liangping and Qi Chongdo ranked 9th and 10th respectively. Qi Chongdo was the successor of Sun Moon Palace and Shao Qing, his senior brother. He didn't show his strength before, but now he could be ranked in the top 10 of the junior giants, which caused many people to be shocked. But Yulinkong, the top junior giant of the Pure Land of Longevity, only ranked 8th, which also surprised countless onlookers. Because according to everyone's speculation, Yulinkong should at least be ranked 5th or so. But now, he couldn't even defeat Alu, the barbarian, and was ranked 8th, which was undoubtedly beyond everyone's expectation. Especially those strong practitioners of the Pure Land of Longevity, they all looked as if they had lost their parents and couldn't accept it. They felt unreconciled for Yulinkong. Yulinkong was also stunned. His face was gloomy and he was hit hard. Originally, he was full of shame when he was suppressed by Lin Sun. But now, he could only be ranked 8th. How could he, who was proud and arrogant, accept it? Seeing this, Lin Sun was slightly stunned. He couldn't help but think of Shun Baishuan's comment when he crossed the border river. Yulinkong is just a talent cultivated by a family of saints with all kinds of resources. There was a trace of disdain in his voice. Now, Lin Sun vaguely felt that Shun Baishuan's comments seemed to be good. At the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival, Lin Sun also fought with Yulinkong. What made Lin Sun feel difficult was not how terrifying Yulinkong's fighting capacity was, but the Immortal Temple, which was an extremely terrible holy treasure. Now, without the holy treasure, Yulinkong was obviously inferior to Ji Xingyao, Zhao Jingxian, Alu, and others in terms of foundation. Of course, Yulinkong could be ranked 8th on the list of junior giants among the top generation, which could be regarded as amazing. He was not a mediocre person. As if noticing Lin Sun's gaze, Yulinkong frowned and his face became gloomier. He couldn't accept this result. Lin Sun, this battle is restricted by the rules. When I leave this place, I will suppress you with my own hands. Yulinkong said word by word in his heart, revealing a strong and resolute hatred. Boom! Suddenly, the immortal mountain bloomed with blazing immortal brilliance, producing a roar that shook the heaven and earth. It was like the resonance of the Great Way, which attracted the attention of all the practitioners present. The final battle for the top 4 was about to begin, yet such a phenomenon had occurred, and it caused all the cultivators in the surroundings to be shocked. What's going on? Lin Sun and the others were stunned as well. They'd already made sufficient preparations and were prepared to fight according to the rules, yet never had they imagined that an unexpected event would occur at this moment. Rumble. The movement of the immortal mountain grew even greater. Auspicious rays of light suddenly descended from the sky, while divine light surged into appearance, and it illuminated this expanse of the heavens and the earth with a divine aura. At the same time, numerous fluctuations of the laws of order charged out and ceaselessly interweaved in space. They were dazzling and resplendent, and they actually gradually formed the outline of a peerlessly mighty figure. My God, what's that? Everyone was shocked. Their pupils dilated as they gazed at this scene with disbelief, and even their hearts trembled. The divine aura of the laws of order was truly too shocking. P.S. The gap between us and the first is growing wider and wider. Everyone, please eagerly seek monthly votes. There were many who didn't know how to cast their votes. It was very simple. Besides the minimum number of votes they possessed, they could also give gifts. Chapter 1080. Auspicious clouds descended from the sky, and the holy light was immortal. Between the heavens and the earth, the power of various rules flickered with a dazzling luster. Under the shocked gazes of the crowd, it condensed into an imposing figure. Bathed in the aura of immortality, he was tall and holy, like a god that had descended. Everyone was dumbfounded. In the past battles of the minor giants, there had never been such a shocking phenomenon. The imposing figure stood in the sky above the central battlefield of Providence, looking down at everyone with the majesty of an ancient god. The final battle concerns the direction of the great world and has far-reaching significance. The rules of the battle and the outcome will be decided by me. The imposing figure was shrouded in the fluctuations of immortal rules. When he spoke, his voice rumbled like the sonorous voice of the great Tao, resounding through the heavens and earth. Everyone gasped. This is a god? Thinking of this, everyone's hearts trembled. Then their blood boiled, and their faces became fanatical. The undying Forbidden Land was regarded as one of the 5 great forbidden lands of the Dongxing realm. It was mysterious and unpredictable, especially the undying Divine Mountain, which gathered the fate of the world and was filled with many incredible legends. In the past, who had ever seen such a miraculous scene? Everyone found it difficult to remain calm. I will open the 9 zones battlefield for the 4 of you. Your results in this battle will become battle marks and be engraved in the 9 zones battlefield. The imposing figure was shining all over. Standing there, he exuded an aura that made all living beings fear him. His words stirred the crowd. If not for the godlike figure looking down at them, they would have been in an uproar. The 9 zones battlefield. Battle marks. This was something that had never been heard of before. What was going on? At this moment, only some of the older figures from the ancient orthodoxies were shocked. They had vaguely heard rumors about the 9 zones battlefield. The 9 zones battlefield. Could it be true? Not only does the ancient desolation domain exist in this world, but there are also other domains. A skinny old man's expression changed, and his heart trembled. The ancient books of the Sun Moon Hall have mentioned that this is the battlefield where the geniuses of all domains fight for supremacy on the divine path. That's right. There are also remnants of similar records in the Origin sect. However, most of them are extremely vague and vague. The only clear record is the 8 words outside of the ancient desolation domain. All are enemies. 9 zones. At the foot of the mountain, a few of the older generation were discussing among themselves. This immediately triggered a commotion, and everyone's expressions changed greatly. Such a matter was too unreal, and it caused one's mind to be unable to calm down. Many people revealed strange expressions. Although Lin Sun and the other 3 could compete for the top 4, it was only for the minor tycoon list. There were many more terrifying existences in the world. For example, Yin Qingbai, Yin Zhanxiu. Then there was Wang Xuanyu, Mi Hengzhen, and Yimo. These supreme giants of the previous generation were only slightly older than the experts present here. In terms of foundation and combat strength, they were much stronger. That godlike figure was going to open the 9 regions battlefield for the 4 of them to fight. Wasn't this thinking too highly of them? There is more than one 9 regions battlefield. Not only is it a place for the geniuses of a region to battle, but it is also a place for experts who have stepped into the ultimate realm to battle. Since ancient times, it has rarely been opened. In the void, the imposing figure spoke. His voice rumbled, resonating with the heavens and earth, striking straight into the hearts of people. This caused the older figures of the ancient orthodoxies to be slightly dumbfounded. They actually didn't understand such a matter in detail, and it made them feel very ashamed and shocked. In addition, when the foreign regions start a war, the 9 regions battlefield is also a place for battles, and it is also regarded as the divine battleground. The imposing figure's voice was dignified, cold, and emotionless. As soon as these words were spoken, it was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples. Divine battleground? There was an uproar, and all the cultivators of the ancient orthodoxies knew about it. All the ancient orthodoxies had records of the divine battleground in their ancient books. It was rumored that the divine battleground would appear after a long period of time. Only the true experts at the peak of a region could participate in it and compete for the divine path. To be more precise, it was a competition between a group of peerless figures who could lead an era. It was a competition between the legendary geniuses who had the qualifications to step into the divine path and illuminate the heavens. It was also known as a competition between peerless monsters, geniuses, peerless heroes, and other existences beneath the heavens. When it came to the 9 regions battlefield, everyone might feel unfamiliar, but they still had some understanding of the divine battleground. Every orthodoxy that had stood since ancient times had records, rumors, or clues about this place. But all of this had a premise. The divine battleground would only appear in the world when the world was in chaos. At this moment, What did the imposing figure of the immortal mountain mean when he mentioned the 9 regions battlefield? Did it mean that the coming great era would also be a chaotic one? Everyone's expression was uncertain, and their hearts were tumbling. A battle for the minor titan ranking had unexpectedly pulled out so many shocking secrets. This was something that no one had expected. Moreover, such a thing had never happened before. Did this mean that, under the background of the coming great era, this battle for the minor giants ranking would be different from the past? Lin Sun was very calm, but he couldn't help glancing at Zhao Jingxian at this moment. Because as early as in the Xiao Empire, Zhao Jingxian had told him that the great era would be a chaotic one. He didn't believe that Zhao Jingxian could predict such shocking secrets in advance at that time. Obviously, the reason why she could know these things was related to the great emperor who sat on the throne of the Xiao Empire. The words chaotic world are what my father once said. If you don't understand, you can go back and ask him later. Zhao Jingxian instantly guessed Lin Sun's thoughts and made such an explanation. The great emperor of Xiao was extraordinary. Lin Sun even felt that there were many places in the mortal world that were more mysterious than the ancient desolation, such as the ultimate, the burial of Tao Si grave, the bloodthirsty battlefield. May I ask who you are, senior? Yeah, Itchin suddenly asked. Everyone was shocked at first, and then held their breath, wanting to know the identity of this godlike figure. I'm just a wisp of willpower formed by the rules of the immortal mountain. You can call me spiritual servant. His voice was indifferent and emotionless. Spiritual servant. From his words, people could tell that he was not a real creature, but a pure incarnation of order and rules, which was extremely terrifying. I don't care about the 9 regions battlefield, and I don't want to know the divine battleground. I just want to have a good fight now. Ye Chen's words were like a sword, and so was he. This made many people frown. If they could take this opportunity to learn some secrets from the spiritual servant, it would definitely be of great significance. But Ye Chen was not interested at all, which was very disappointing. Sure, the spiritual servant didn't feel offended, or in other words, he seemed too sacred and imposing from beginning to end, and there was no emotional fluctuation at all. After saying that, he stretched out his hand and pointed. 4 wisps of rule power swept out and poured into the eyebrows of Lin Sun, Ye Chen, laughing at the heavens, and Jin Muyun. In an instant, Lin Sun and the others all understood the rules of this last round. One by one, each person had to fight with the other 3 once, and the final ranking would be determined according to the final result. Based on this calculation, only 6 battles were needed. For example, the battle between Lin Sun and Jin Muyun was counted as each of them fighting once. Next, they only needed to fight with the other 2 separately. Actually, if one were to calculate carefully, in the 6 battles, each person would have fought 3 times. This was undoubtedly very fair for Lin Sun and the others. Boom! The spiritual servant waved his sleeve, and the incomparably ancient battlefield of Providence suddenly buzzed at this moment. Dense and dazzling rules of order emerged like a tide, covering the entire battlefield. In the blink of an eye, the entire battlefield had undergone earth-shaking changes. It could be seen floating in the void, and it was as big as a piece of land. Its whole body flowed with a pale golden, sacred luster, as if it was cast from immortal gold. At the same time, it was inscribed with countless rules of order. Looking at it from afar, it gave people a kind of oppressive aura. This is the 9 regions battlefield. Everyone was shocked. A battlefield flowed with a supreme and sacred majesty, as if it was immortal. Just the aura alone was enough to make people feel awe. Let's begin. The spirit servant's figure shifted and stood outside the battlefield. Your battle imprints will be a kind of qualification. It all depends on whether or not you can participate in the 9 regions sacred battlefield when you ascend to the Saint Realm in the future. This was a silent reminder to Lin Sun and the others about the importance of having a fighting brand. Lin Sun and the others were all moved, and their eyes surged. They looked at each other, and an invisible fighting spirit burst forth from them. Laughing at the heavens, come up and fight. After defeating you today, the title of Sword and Saber Master is destined to become a thing of the past. Yi Chen's figure flashed, and he appeared on the battlefield. His figure was as straight as a sword, and his purple robe fluttered in the wind. His whole body emitted a blazing sword intent. I've long wanted to experience your Empress Myrtle sword tactics. Today, I hope you won't let me down. Laughing at the heavens laughed loudly, and his figure appeared on the battlefield like a gust of wind, facing Yi Chun from afar. In an instant, all eyes were drawn to him, and everyone's face was full of expectation. Sword Devil Yi Chun fought alone in the northern Dipper world, and his sword light froze 9,000 provinces. He was a real genius in swordsmanship, and he had many dazzling achievements. He was regarded as the future lord of the Yi clan of Crepe Myrtle Mountain. Laughing at the heavens with saber, he once said, "I dare to laugh at the heavens like a pond, and my saber hates heaven and earth." He was not inferior to Sword Devil Yi Chun. The two were regarded as the sword and saber master in the northern Dipper world, and they were no different from the peerless duo. And this would also be the first time the two would really fight. No matter whether they won or lost, after this battle, the two were destined to have a clear winner, and it would attract the attention of the whole world. Who would win and who would lose? Even Lin Sun was looking forward to it. According to the rules set by the spiritual servants, he needed to fight in the second, fourth, and sixth battles. Therefore, he could take this opportunity to see how strong laughing at the heavens and Yi Chun were. P.S. The following is free, so don't be too long-winded. Please allow Goldfish to speak more during the battle for the top rankings. Today, Saber God published a new book, and he reached the top in one fell swoop. Goldfish also admired and envied him greatly. However, Goldfish would not admit defeat. It was only the second day of this month, and there were still many days left. There was enough time to break out, to work hard, and to break through. Those who have cast their monthly votes, don't be discouraged. Thank you, you've all done your best. Those who haven't cast their votes, please give Goldfish a precious vote. Here, I'd especially like to thank 77 to 888 Jujio. In the book review section, I had a disagreement with him, but he didn't hesitate to support me today and cast many monthly votes. I'm quite touched and proud. Thank you so much. Chapter 1081. On the combat arena, the battle erupted. No matter if it was Sword Devil Yi Chun or laughing at the heavens, both of them were clearly aware of how terrifying their opponents were, so they didn't hold back at all and attacked with all their strength. Clang! A violet ancient sword emitted a clear howl as it shot into the sky. Yi Chun strode through the sky while controlling the sword, and the imposing aura around him was like an erupting volcano that seemed to intend to incinerate the world. The sword was called Weapon of Nothingness. It was overflowing with an ancient aura and emanated violet energy, and it was an extreme weapon of the King Tao. Weapon of Nothingness implied that one didn't adhere to rules and followed one's heart to cut through the fetters. This sword was exactly like the sword Tao that Yi Chun sought, to follow one's heart. With this sword in hand, Yi Chun was like an emperor of the sword Tao that had descended to the world. Violet sword chi swept out horizontally, and it carried peerless might. In an instant, everyone was visibly moved. Their eyes and souls felt a piercing pain as if they were being sliced apart because the violet sword chi was too vast and blazing. However, laughing at the heavens wasn't inferior. His aura was like the sun that illuminated the sky alone. It was sharp and radiated boundless radiance, and it revealed an arrogant expression. His blade was like him, sharp, bright, and like a boundless white waterfall of stars. It swept through the sky and was peerlessly domineering. The blade was called Ru Gue, and it took the meaning of facing death with equanimity. Merely its name caused one's heart to tremble. Perhaps it was just like its blade Tao. It was overbearing to the extreme, and there was no reason to retreat. Clang! 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 A terrifying sound of collision resounded. On the battlefield, the two of them fought fiercely. It was like an emperor of the sword and an overlord of the blade had encountered each other. For a time, Saber chi swept out horizontally while sword chi soared into the sky, and it was a shocking scene. This was indeed the most dazzling and most brilliant battle since the beginning of the Minor Tycoon rankings. The howls of sabers and swords resounded like the roars of dragons and the cries of phoenixes. "They're too strong." Countless spectators gasped while they stared fixedly at the battlefield with their eyes wide open. As the battle progressed, their minds were drawn over tightly, and they forgot everything else. Even the figures of the older generation were fiercely shocked, and they sighed with emotion. They felt that they were too inferior to these two when they were young. Two such geniuses have actually appeared in the Big Dipper realm, and they just happen to be like twin stars. Regardless of the outcome, they're bound to have a place in the battles in the future. Someone sighed, causing many to resonate with him. Yi Chen's sword is like the arrival of an emperor, and he possesses the might to look down upon the world and look down upon the world. Yet he isn't restrained by the shackles of the sword and moves as he pleases. Such a sword Dao is truly extraordinary. Lin Sun murmured in his heart. His mind was also attracted by it. This battle was like a competition between two blazing suns, and it caused his blood to boil while his vital energy surged, and he aroused the impulse to participate in the battle. The saber that laughs at the heavens possesses the might to dominate the world, and it's unrestrained like fire. It's like an overlord that can sweep through the world. If one doesn't possess a formidable mental state, then there's utterly no need to fight before one would be deterred by its might. Lin Sun's black eyes were full of thoughts. Although he paid attention to the details of the battle, his mind was quickly deducing what he should do if he fought with the two. Gradually, his brows furrowed tightly. There was no way to compare. That was because it was difficult to judge the depth of these two people's martial arts power just by analyzing it. They had already reached the point of perfection and could control it as they pleased. If he wanted to defeat them, he would have to fight them himself. It was doomed to be impossible to get a definite answer just by deduction and comparison. Thinking of this, Lin Sun took a deep breath and abandoned the distracting thoughts in his mind. His mind also became clear, empty, and tranquil like the moon in the blue sea, pure and clean. When he looked at the duel on the battlefield again, Lin Sun's state of mind was tranquil and tranquil. Although laughing at the heavens and Yechen were powerful enough to attract the attention of the world, they were not enough to affect his mind. 300 moves, 600 moves, 900 moves. On the arena, the battle was getting fiercer and fiercer. It was hard to distinguish the winner from the loser. The world was full of the collision of swords and sabers. It was like thunder rising from the blue sky, and the gods were agitating in all directions. The sound of Tao, the brilliance, the vision, all kinds of shocking scenes appeared, which made the two gods collide with each other like a peerless battle. This was undoubtedly an evenly matched duel. No matter who wanted to win, it was extremely difficult. The arena had long been silent, and all eyes were attracted by the duel. Some weaker cultivators were disturbed by the duel because their mind were too unstable, and they couldn't help but cough up blood and almost suffer the backlash of qi. There were also some cultivators that obtained sudden comprehension while spectating the battle, and they benefited greatly from it. They felt like they comprehended the Tao and were overjoyed. A duel had caused so many things to happen outside the arena, and it was really unbelievable. From this, it could be seen how shocking and extraordinary this battle was. If it happened in the outside world, it was bound to cause a great stir in the four realms of the ancient desolation. When the battle went on for over 1,000 moves, both laughing at the heavens and Yechen were slightly out of breath, and both of them were injured. But their fighting will was undoubtedly extremely terrifying. They didn't show any signs of weakening as they fought, and they became even fiercer and stronger instead. Unexpectedly, the spiritual servant standing outside the battlefield suddenly spoke before the outcome of the duel could be decided, and it stopped the duel. "Stop. If you continue to fight, both sides will suffer losses." As soon as the spiritual servant finished speaking, laughing at the heavens and Yechen were separated from each other, and they were teleported out of the battlefield and returned to their respective peaks. This was shocking. Could it be done like this? An unparalleled battle had been forcefully stopped, and this was too displeasing to the eyes of the spectators. Although some cultivators were dissatisfied, they didn't dare to say anything in the face of the spiritual servant who was like a god. Lin Sun nodded to himself. He could also see that if the battle continued, the two of them were bound to be unable to decide the outcome, because their combat strength was almost at the same level, and even if there was a difference, it was only a very slight difference, and it couldn't affect the outcome at all. How rare. These two people must be taken seriously and can't be underestimated. At the foot of the mountain, Yin Zhanxiu couldn't help but sigh with emotion. The young people of this generation were rising too quickly, and he felt a sense of urgency from laughing at the heavens and Yechen that they were about to catch up. Laughing at the heavens, this is only a battle for the minor giants after all, and we can't fight to our heart's content. If you have the guts, let's choose another place to fight after we leave this place. What do you think? On the peak of the mountain, Yechen spoke with a clear voice that resounded through the sky. Sure, but I'm afraid you won't dare to keep the appointment when the time comes. Laughing at the heavens, laughed arrogantly. Yechen raised his eyebrows and then smiled. Oh, I hope you can still be so insolent when I suppress you. The two of them were like a pair of fated enemies, opposing each other with equal harshness, and neither was willing to yield to the other. It made people click their tongues and sigh with emotion. Whoosh, the spiritual servant waved his sleeves, and two magnificent divine raindrops fell from the sky, bathing Yechen and laughing at the heavens. This was a treatment that only the minor giants who competed for the top 4 could enjoy, and it didn't affect the next battle. It was Lin Sun's turn to fight in the second battle, and his opponent was the head of the 13 swords of the heaven-reaching sword sect, Brahma Sword, Jin Muyun. Seeing that it was the battle between these two, the spectators outside the city were all excited. Demon God Lin, you've boasted before that you would defeat Jin Muyun in 3 moves. Don't go back on your words. Someone shouted, and he didn't mind the commotion. Yes, you said that if you can't win in 3 moves, you'll lose. We'd like to see what makes you, Demon God Lin, so bold. In the field, there was a constant uproar, and everyone was waiting to see Lin Sun make a fool of himself. After all, they had just witnessed the battle between the sword and saber masters. Even these 2 top figures were hard to determine the winner. How could Jin Muyun, who was also qualified to compete for the top 4, be defeated in 3 moves? This lad has lifted a rock and dropped it on his own feet. The expressions of the older generation experts all became strange. Alu shouted, his voice like thunder, "Don't listen to the cawing of those crows. You'll defeat him in 3 moves. Slap those crows in the face." Zhao Jingxian almost couldn't help but roll her eyes. This barbarian spoke too lightly. Was he deliberately provoking Lin Sun? However, Alu also said what Zhao Jingxian was thinking. Hearing the voices in the field that were not optimistic about Lin Sun, she also felt very upset. She wished that Lin Sun could defeat Jin Muyun directly and slap the faces of those onlookers. Lin Sun seemed to be unaware of the laughter, uproar, and sarcasm. He floated to the battlefield with a calm look. At the same time, Jin Muyun also came, but his face was extremely cold. His eyes were like swords, and he locked on Lin Sun, saying, "Do you feel regretful?" Being provoked by Lin Sun with the agreement of 3 moves was a kind of contempt and insult to him. Now that it was mentioned in such a way, although they all wanted to see Lin Sun make a fool of himself, he couldn't feel happy at all. "Why should I regret it?" Lin Sun asked. "Humph, you're so stubborn. If you could defeat me in 3 moves, I promise that I'll definitely stay as far away as possible from wherever you appear in the future." Jin Miyun's eyes were fierce, and his words were aggressive. "But if you can't do it, not only will you admit defeat, but you will also have to apologize to me and atone for your rude words." Okay. Lin Sun agreed without thinking and was very casual. This casual attitude was regarded as a kind of arrogance by Jin Muyun, which made him gnash his teeth secretly. This guy was really bold to the point of acting recklessly. Clang! A fiery red spiritual sword that emitted terrifying power appeared in Jin Muyun's hand. Brahma Sword. one of the ancient treasures of the Heavenly Sword sect, one of the famous supreme weapons of the Dongsheng domain. With the sword in hand, Jin Muyun's aura changed. It was as if a dust-laden, peerless sword had been unsheathed at this moment. Its sharpness was peerless, and it soared into the sky, shattering the clouds. "Come on, let me see your true trump card, Demon Godlin." Jin Muyun's words were resolute and decisive. In his eyes, there was a terrifying sword intent surging. He was dressed in a jade robe, and his black hair fluttered in the wind. He was like an unparalleled sword immortal, dazzling and elegant. Everyone's eyes lit up. This was Jin Muyun. If he was given some time to grow, it was very likely that he would become the second Yun Qingbai, invincible under the King realm. Facing such an opponent, Lin Sun actually boasted that he could defeat him in 3 moves. This undoubtedly made everyone feel that it was ridiculous. Was this possible? P.S. First of all, I'd like to thank all the children who bought tickets and supported me on the 2nd. Thank you. Today, on the 3rd, I'll continue with 5 updates. This is the first update, and the time is the same as yesterday. Chapter 1082. Jin Muyun's clothes fluttered while his black hair fluttered. The Brahma sword seethed with flames, causing him to seem like a sword immortal that had descended to the mortal world. Moreover, his peerlessly fierce, imposing aura caused many experts of the senior generation to be visibly moved. This kid is only a little over 20 this year, yet he already possesses such attainments. Yun Qingbai was nothing more than this all those years ago. Demon Godlin is going to make a fool of himself. Not to mention 3 moves, it's probably impossible for him to defeat Jin Muyun even if he uses 100 or 1,000 moves. This kid deserves to be the leader of the 13 swords of the Heavenly Sword sect. Exclamations of admiration resounded in the surroundings, and all of them were astounded by the imposing aura Jin Muyun revealed. What'll he do? Ye Chun, laughing at the heavens, Zhao Jingxian Alu, Yu Linkong, Li Qingping, Chu Beihai, Donglu, all the minor heavyweights were paying close attention as well. Some wished for nothing more than for Lin Sun to make a fool of himself and slap his own face. Some wondered exactly where Lin Sun got the confidence to say that he would obtain victory in 3 moves under such circumstances. Under the gazes of everyone present, Lin Sun casually tied his long hair behind his head in an orderly manner, and his expression was calm and indifferent. However, his pair of black eyes that were like abysses were already filled with battle intent that was dense like lava. This? Everyone acutely noticed that along with this extremely casual movement of Lin Sun's, an extremely formidable aura surged into appearance from his body. In an instant, Lin Sun seemed as if he'd become a different person, and he wasn't as ordinary and extraordinary as before. His thin and handsome figure was suffused with an overbearing aura that was like a mountain and lofty like the sky, and as his eyes opened and closed, divine light surged within them. Moreover, his aura was still rising. It was like an unfathomable abyss had awakened at this moment and was circulating with a rumble. My God! The hearts of many trembled, and they felt it was difficult for them to even breathe. At this moment, Lin Sun seemed to be extremely different. If it was said that he was like a sharp blade that was sharp, arrogant, domineering, and invincible in the previous battles, then at this moment, he seemed to possess the aura of supremacy. So, at this moment, he seemed to possess the aura of supremacy in the heavens and the earth. His entire body seethed with blazing clear colored light of the Tao, causing him to seem boundlessly terrifying. Fiend Celestial Lin, what a man! He actually endured until now before revealing his true strength. Laughing at the heavens, and Yi Chen's pupils constricted, and then they exclaimed in surprise. This guy has been hiding his strength all along. Some of the spectators swallowed their saliva with difficulty, and their expressions became extremely interesting. The Fiend Celestial Lin in front of them was like a completely different person from before. Anyone could tell that he had been holding back all this while. Damn it! Yu Linkong, Chu Beihai, and the other powerhouses opened their eyes wide with gloomy expressions. They seemed to be filled with both shock and anger and disbelief. This kid is really good at enduring. At the foot of the mountain, many experts from the ancient orthodoxies were moved. This is him. Zhao Jingshuan's eyes were clear like water, bright like stars. F***ck me, this guy is really cunning. He's only revealing his true strength now. Alu shrieked. Jin Muyun's expression changed slightly. A frightening sword glow flowed within his eyes as he said, "No wonder you dare to be so arrogant. However, do you think that you can defeat me in 3 moves with just this?" As soon as these words came out, the shock in the field subsided a lot. Indeed, no matter how strong Demon God Lin was, he was still a powerhouse at the peak of the reincarnation development realm. As someone of the same generation, how could Ji Miyun be unable to withstand 3 moves? Thinking of this, the crowd felt more relaxed. In particular, the experts from the Heavenly Sword sect sneered and waited to watch the show. Yes, Lin Sun nodded calmly, as if he was talking about something that couldn't be more ordinary. At this moment, every move of his was filled with Taoist light, and he was enshrouded in divine brilliance. He was like a dominator who had the great spirit to control the mountains and rivers. He had really become different. Everyone's expression changed. At this moment, Lin Sun truly had the aura of a demon god. Looking at him from afar, one would feel oppressed. Jin Muyun was so angry that he laughed. He pointed the sword in his hand at Lin Sun and said word by word, "I'll let you slap your own face." Clang! He couldn't help but attack first. The Brahma sword in his hand suddenly burst out with monstrous divine flame sword intent. It crushed the void and fell from the sky like a meteor shower of fire. This sword was not only overbearing, but also contained a copious momentum of the Great Way. The sound of the sword was like an explosion, as if it was going to break the barriers of happiness and break the confinement of happiness. It emitted a shocking force that reached straight to the heart. There was no doubt that Jin Muyun's swordsmanship had reached an extraordinary level. Just one strike showed the invincible demeanor of a peerless swordsman. Similarly, it could also be seen that although he didn't believe that Lin Sun could defeat him in 3 moves, he absolutely didn't hold back when he attacked. When the sword was drawn, it dazzled the universe and shocked everyone present. Such a stunning sword made some of the powerhouses feel palpitate and shocked. How could Lin Sun resolve this sword? Or perhaps, even blocking it would be very strenuous? At the same time, Lin Sun also moved. To everyone's surprise, Lin Sun didn't use any treasures. Instead, he clenched his palm and fingers, and a fist burst out. Boom! However, this fist seemed too magical. As soon as it appeared, it deduced a series of phenomena of destruction in an instant, such as landslides, cracking seas, incinerating the void, pythons and dragons coming out of the abyss, and the clear cry of a phoenix later on. The sky collapsed, the great prison sank, and the apocalyptic spectacle of all life collapsing appeared. These phenomena and mysteries were gathered in the fist in an instant, and suddenly, the fist was filled with an indescribable force. It seemed to shake the sky and make the sky crack. Shaking Heaven Punch, the extremely tough and overbearing fist that combined various mysteries of shaking Heaven 9 strikes, was covered by the power of the truth of water, adding an indestructible spirit. Boom! The fist crossed the sky. Wherever it passed, the void was unstoppable, and chaos surged, causing Jin Muyun to immediately feel a sense of suffocation. It was difficult for him to breathe, and his soul was greatly affected. His face changed abruptly. In the face of this punch, he had an illusion that he didn't know how to resist it. He was like an ant that didn't know how to avoid the claw of an ancient dragon. He suddenly bit the tip of his tongue, and his mind instantly returned to its senses. After that, he suddenly realized that his Tao heart had actually been intimidated by the might of his opponent's fist. All of this occurred in an instant. When Jin Muyun wanted to change his move, it was already too late. Bang! On the entire battlefield, a sword and a fist collided with each other. In an instant, the nearby space rumbled and collapsed like a piece of paper. Various divine radiance and the glow of the Tao shot out, and it was terrifying and chaotic to the extreme. This was unlike the battles from before. Both sides of the battle intended to decide the outcome within 3 moves. So, as soon as they attacked, they'd executed their respective trump cards, and the impetus and destructive force they revealed was bound to be different. Some cultivators in the battlefield weren't even able to see the details of the battle clearly before their eyes were pierced by pain, and their souls suffered injuries. Stomp! Stomp! Amidst the dust and dirt that suffused the air, Jin Myun's figure retreated repeatedly, uncontrollably. He felt the force of that punch charge into his body like a wild horse that had escaped its reins and was charging about. It shook him to the point his internal organs almost turned upside down, and every single inch of his flesh and blood ached as if they were pricked by needles. In an instant, he actually felt as if the heavens and the earth were spinning, and he was on the verge of fainting. Everyone was dumbstruck on the spot while their hearts and minds were shocked by this scene. Earlier, they were still pondering if Lin Sun would be able to resist Jin Myun's shocking sword strike. But in the blink of an eye, Lin Sun's punch had easily injured Jin Myun. This change in events occurred too quickly and in an instant, and it caused most people to think they were seeing things and didn't dare believe all of this. Pooh! In the battlefield, Jin Myun had endured for a long time, yet he wasn't able to endure it in the end, and he coughed up blood while his countenance turned slightly pale. On the other hand, Lin Sun's figure was towering and motionless, and only his moon-white clothes fluttered in the wind while he was completely unharmed. Everyone in the surroundings couldn't help but become restless and exclaim with astonishment while revealing astounded expressions. Only now did they finally dare confirm that this strike had actually injured Jin Myun. How could this be possible? Everyone's eyes widened, and they were dumbfounded. What a powerful punch! Yichin closed his eyes, and his mind swiftly recalled all the details from before. His expression was solemn, which was rare for him, shaking the heavens and the earth, unparalleled. The profundity contained in this punch is too powerful. Xiao Tsang muttered in his heart, and, at the same time, he also started to deduce the details. The other experts of the older generation couldn't help but be moved. Based on their judgment, they could naturally tell that this strike didn't contain any tricks, and it was completely a head-on collision. However, Jin Myun was forced back, and this undoubtedly proved that Demon God Lin was stronger. Did I underestimate him once again? Yin Zhanqiu's expression became gloomy. Previously, he had already overestimated Lin Sun's battle prowess by repeatedly re-evaluating it, but who would have thought that the truth would still exceed his expectations? On the battlefield, Jin Myun's expression was gloomy, bewildered, and filled with disbelief. One move. Both of them had gone all out, but he was still shaken. Did this mean that Demon God Lin's achievements on the Peerless Tao were higher than his? Open your dog eyes wide and see what is the demeanor of a demon god. To think that you were so arrogant and sarcastic just now. Have you been slapped in the face now? In the distance, Alu laughed maniacally. He was born to shoot his mouth off, so there was no reason for him not to take advantage of this opportunity. At the foot of the mountain, many people had ugly expressions, especially the experts of the Heavenly Sword sect. They couldn't wait to tear this barbarian's mouth apart. It's only one move. Does he really think he can win just like that? An elder from the Heavenly Sword sect said coldly. It's normal for there to be mistakes in the first exchange, but if you say that Demon God Lin can win within 3 moves, that would be the biggest joke in the world. The moment he said this, many people agreed. They were all experts from the ancient orthodoxies who hated Lin Sun, so they naturally wouldn't stand on Lin Sun's side. TSK. You won't shed a tear until you see your coffin. If I were you, I would have already King slapped my own mouth. Alu sneered. Enough! Jin Myun roared, his expression frighteningly livid. As a proud swordsman, he naturally wouldn't allow such a thing to happen. Then he suddenly looked at Lin Sun and said, "Your strength has indeed exceeded my expectations, but it's destined that you won't be able to defeat me." Chapter 1083. Hearing Jin Muyun's words, Lin Sun's expression didn't change, but the fighting intent in his eyes became more and more intense, as if it was going to burn the sky. In the previous battles, in order to prevent the other small giants from seeing through him, he had indeed kept some trump cards and trump cards hidden. For example, the heaven-shaking fist that had pushed Jin Muyun back. However, this was not the strongest trump card that he had. Therefore, no matter how pessimistic the outside world was, it could not affect Lin Sun's state of mind. The Tao of the sword is capable of piercing through the heavens. Within the Zhou void, there is nothing that cannot be slashed. Amidst the tide-like sword cries, Jin Muyun's aura suddenly rose, and the Brahma sword swept through the air, striking out horizontally. This sword is called the Great Zhou Void Furnace. With a loud shout, the sword intent soared into the sky. Wherever it passed, the void was incinerated like a furnace fire bursting out, converging into a chaotic torrent of swords and rushing towards Lin Sun. Great Zhou Void Sword Scripture. Loud cries resounded in the surroundings. Everyone recognized that this was one of the three supreme sword sutras of the Heavenly Sword Sect, the Great Zhou Void Sword Sutra that stood alongside the Cataclysm Sword Sutra and the Great Yin-Yang Sword Sutra. This sword scripture was the core inheritance of the three supreme sword scriptures. Every sword strike was compatible with the great Tao of Zhou Su and was extremely murderous. For example, the universe void furnace had condensed the phenomena of a universe and the energy of the world into a single sword strike. Its might could shock the heavens and the earth. In ancient times, the Tongtian sword ancestor relied on this sword scripture to slaughter countless peerless experts, earning the title of sword ancestor, and his sword intent reached the heavens. Although Jin Muyun's sword had yet to reach the terrifying level of sword ancestor Tongtian's, it could be said to be unparalleled among the peak experts of a younger generation. Even if it was the sword demon Yi Chun, his eyes couldn't help but narrow when he saw this sword strike that seized the power of nature, and he sensed how terrifying its might was. Rumble. This sword strike hadn't even arrived when the entire battlefield seemed to have transformed into a furnace, and it was filled with surging and blazing fierce sword insight and boundless killing intent. Terrifying, devastation, fierce, and domineering. It was obvious that Jin Muyun had used his strongest technique in this second move, gathering the strongest strength he had ever cultivated. Everyone in the surroundings felt suffocated. Zhao Jingxian and Alu's expressions changed slightly as they sensed how terrifying this attack was. Yu Lingkong, Li Qingping, and the others were also shocked by this attack. They had to admit that Jin Muyun was indeed extremely powerful. At the same time, they were filled with anticipation. Would Demon God Lin still dare to use his fist to block this attack? The eyes of the Heavenly Sword Sect cultivators were filled with excitement and anticipation. 9 tribulations as one. Trapped dragon ascending to the heavens. Almost at the same time, Lin Sun straightened his back, and around him there appeared many phantoms of divine beasts. There was a snow-white ice hoe with its head held high, a ferocious swan and eye carrying a heavy load, a swan and eye stepping on mountains and rivers, a swan and eye spitting out immortal clouds and divine mist. There were Yizi, Qionyou, Chaofeng, Pulao, and Basya. 9 divine beasts were sitting in the void around Lin Sun. Their ferocious power was monstrous. The divine power they exuded made Lin Sun look like a peerless dragon. This scene was too extraordinary. It was like they'd returned to the ancient times, and it revealed a terrifying scene that caused the heavens and the earth to dim down. Everyone in the field was shocked and broke out in a cold sweat. What kind of cultivation method was this? How could it be so abnormal? Yin Zhanxiu, on the other hand, stood up abruptly, his eyes bursting with fury. How could this man master the 9 transformations of the Calamity Dragon? To him, the 9 transformations of the Calamity Dragon had an extraordinary significance. It was a knot in his heart. Bang, 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 bang. At the same time, on the battlefield, the attacks of the two had already collided, producing a terrifying roar that shook the heaven and earth and shook the surroundings. It could be clearly seen that the sword Chi, which was like the great Zhou void furnace, was crushed, exploded, and annihilated with irresistible force. Dazzling light rained scattered and turned into turbulent currents that surged in all directions. The whole battlefield shook along with it. The hard and ancient ground emitted dense power of rules and order to dissolve the impact. Outside the field, the indifferent spirit servant was also moved at this moment. He was the embodiment of rules and order and a wisp of the immortal mountain's will. Naturally, he could clearly sense the terrifying power of this attack. Boom! The phantoms of the 9 divine beasts displayed their ferocious might. In the blink of an eye, they had already destroyed the great Zhou void furnace and engulfed Jin Muyun. Jin Muyun's hair stood on end, and his expression changed drastically. How is this possible? At this moment, he felt as if he'd been locked onto and confined, and he was trapped within the shackles of a cage. He was unable to escape or avoid it. Scram! He roared angrily and activated the ruthlessness in his heart. He circulated all the power in his body, and the Brahma sword instantly burst forth with boundless sword fire. Boom! The collision erupted, and everyone outside the field felt a piercing pain in their eyes. They could no longer look at the battle. At the same time, a terrifying roar spread across the field. The entire heaven and earth rumbled and trembled. The spirit servant waved his sleeve, and the power of rules and order spread across the sky, firmly sealing the central battlefield to prevent the aftermath of the collision from spreading and causing everyone to be caught in the crossfire. From this, it could be seen how abnormal the power of this collision was. After a while, everyone looked at the battlefield in shock, only to see Lin Sun's figure standing still on the spot. Opposite him, Ji Miyun also did not move at all. Could it be that this collision was a draw? Kacha! Kacha! When this thought had just appeared in everyone's hearts, they heard a wave of fine sounds of bones breaking coming from Ji Miyun's body, and it seemed extremely ear-piercing in this silent atmosphere. It seemed as if the inside of his body was suffering an impact and destruction. After that, under the astounded gazes of everyone, Jin Miyun's body suddenly trembled, and he continuously spat out over 10 mouthfuls of blood. Every time he coughed out a mouthful of blood, his body would tremble, and strands of blood would flow out from the pores on his skin and taint his clothes. After spitting out over 10 mouthfuls of blood, he'd already transformed into a blood man. His entire body was dark red, and it was a horrifying sight. On the other hand, Lin Sun's expression was as calm as before. At the foot of the mountain, the expressions of the spectators changed indeterminately, and they seemed as if they'd seen a ghost. It was too unbelievable. In the previous battle, Ji Miyun was extremely formidable, and he'd even executed the profundities of the great Zhou void sword scripture that was renowned throughout the entire ancient desolation. But it was precisely like this that he'd suffered a severe injury. When they thought of the technique Lin Sun had executed earlier and the terrifying scene of the 9 divine beasts surging into the sky, many cultivators felt a chill run down their spines. What inheritance was that? How could it be so terrifying? Amazing. Yichen nodded to himself. If it was said that he merely felt admiration towards Lin Sun earlier, then at this moment, he'd already taken Lin Sun to be an opponent that he had to take seriously. It seems to be the inheritance of the true dragon bloodline. Could it be that this fellow has some sort of relationship with the true dragon bloodline? Laughing at the heavens, rubbed his chin and fell into contemplation. He's actually comprehended the true profundities of the 9 transformations of the Calamity Dragon. The rage in Yin Zhanqiu's eyes grew denser, and he'd lost his composure from before. It seemed as if he was utterly unable to tolerate the fact that Lin Sun had grasped this secret technique. Impossible. At the foot of the mountain, the experts of the Heavenly Sword sect were exasperated. They were unable to accept this scene, and their expressions seemed to be extremely unsightly. Earlier, they were still looking forward to Jin Muyun displaying his might and defeating Lin Sun. Never had they imagined that Jin Muyun would still be blasted back in the second move of the battle and even suffer a heavy injury. Slap, 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 slap. What a painful slap to the face. Alu, the blabbermouth, began to ridicule the crowd again. His voice was like thunder, and it infuriated the experts at the foot of the mountain to the point of stamping with rage, and they even had the impulse to kill someone. Zhao Jingxuan's smooth lips curved into a knowing smile, and her clear eyes shone with a trace of pride and honor. But immediately after, she noticed Yin Zhanqiu's incomparably terrifying gaze, and this caused her to suddenly frown as she realized something. Immediately after, she shook her head and was unwilling to pay attention to it. The 9 transformations of the Calamity Dragon came from the commune of spiritual tattooists in the forbidden city of Xiao Empire, and it was left behind by Master Lu in the past. No matter who it was, they couldn't say anything against Lin Sun. However, even Zhao Jingxian didn't expect that Lin Sun would actually master the secret of this inheritance. Again, on the battlefield, a hoarse voice like the rubbing of gravel came out from Jin Muyun's mouth. Along with this voice, he slowly raised his head, and his eyes that were already sullen became even more blazing at this moment, like a pair of burning stars. His entire body was covered in blood, and his face was pale. But at this moment, everyone present felt an unyielding and resolute, imposing manner from him. No matter if he was an enemy or a friend, when facing Jin Muyun at this moment, they had to admit that he was an extremely proud, formidable, and dazzling supreme talent. No one would not be moved by this kind of stubborn and resolute spirit. But at the same time, the more it was like this, the more terrifying Lin Sun was. Jin Muyun was already so outstanding, yet Lin Sun was able to defeat him with 2 moves in a row. This undoubtedly seemed extremely terrifying. Based on this spirit and will alone, it's a matter of course that Jin Muyun can be ranked in the top 4. At this moment, even laughing at the heavens, and yet Chun acknowledged Jin Muyun's strength. However, this didn't make Jin Muyun feel happy at all. He was unwilling, even more unable to accept it. You're very good, but unfortunately, you're not Yin Qingbai. Lin Sun spoke as well, yet his words seemed to be slightly inexplicable. The hearts of many cultivators shook, and they seemed to have guessed something. Could it be that the opponent he really wants to defeat is Yin Qingbai? What an arrogant demon god Lin. This caused Jin Muyun's expression to turn gloomy, and he became even more furious. The sword inside in his entire body seemed as if it was burning, and his gaze was terrifyingly icy cold. But before he could speak, Lin Sun had already spoken. This time, receive a move from me as well. His voice hadn't finished resounding through the air when an imposing aura that was condensed like a ray, sharp like a blade, and vast like an abyss rumbled out from his body, and it threw the surroundings into disorder. Clang! The broken blade that was jade white and seemed ethereal flashed out. The Tao markings on the blade were obscure, and it emanated a myriad of gorgeous and dazzling clear colored starlight. The sounds of discussion and the movements of everyone in the surroundings had stopped at this moment. They were able to clearly sense that Lin Sun's imposing aura seemed as if it was connected to the heavens and the earth, and he seemed as if he'd transformed into the one and only supreme exalt in the world that looked down upon the world. Merely this imposing aura caused one's scalp to go numb. On the other hand, the broken blade floated silently in midair at this moment. It didn't emit the slightest sound, and it seemed as if all its strength had been condensed onto that sharp blade, causing this strike to reveal a silent feeling as if everything would move in the opposite direction when it was pushed to the extreme. If this strike flashed out, then how great would its might be? How formidable would its strength be?